come. It's truly a blessing. We're going to try to share some information with each other. It's not like I'm a dictator, just telling you things. We want to share information with each other. Give you a formal lecture, and then we can have some questions and answers, and we can start exchanging. But before I start, we have to do our tradition in respect of our ancestors and respect of those who came before us. We're going to do a libation. Sometimes that's done with alcohol, which I do not suggest that you drink or put on your skin in any way or fashion. And sometimes it's done with juice, and sometimes it's done with water. But the whole principle of it is to just to honor and acknowledge the ancestral genes that are in us that allow us to come this far on this planet at this day and time. And to respect the journey we still have to go with God's light and inspiration. So we're going to pour this libation for those not yet born. Ashe. Those who have died in those cotton fields, on the Atlantic Ocean, on those ships, on the continent, port, protested against the incarceration of all of us. Pour libation in honor of those. We pour libation in honor of our grandmothers, great-grandmothers, those who provided us the inspiration to be who we are and what we are, despite all obstacles. We pour our libations for all of those voices that have not yet been heard, speaking through us in our actions and deeds. And we also pour libation for ancestors who we know, like your grandmother or mother and father or sister and brother, and you say their name. We always say Ashe. So you can give the name of any great ancestor. Please, anyone. Mazoni.
Ransom Williams. Mary Ray.
And we acknowledge all those ancestors who are still present with us, our living ancestors. We acknowledge them, the spirit which they provide for us, and our glory and our discretions too. We acknowledge that, and we pour libation for them. Thank you very much. Well, the topic is homosexuality. It's an epidemic in the African American community here on this continent, North America and South America, and on the continent of Africa. It's an epidemic just like any other epidemic, like so-called AIDS, gonorrhea, and syphilis, because I think in Atlanta still the syphilis capital of the world, it's African Americans. So we are looking at it from another perspective. We're looking at it from the nutritional side of the disease, along with some other aspects of it that maybe you have not heard of. Now, we're suffering from what is called the Caucasian definition of what a disease is, first of all. So some people question whether homosexuality is a disease, because the American Psychiatric Association labels it as normal, where they label excessive eating as a disease. So some of us look at the Caucasians and define things for us. That we should stop doing. We have to define things for ourselves. So we learn that there's such a thing as a disease, and we say yes, it's a disease. And we know that a disease is just when the body is not at ease with itself. And that is essentially a disease. We also learn some other superstitions about diseases, which you call medicine. Whenever you read the word Caucasian textbook, they have in the textbook theory, automatically scratch that word out and put in superstition. Then you understand. Because they have a lot of superstitions about things, which they call theories. So you won't know that it's a superstition. They have a superstition about gravity, and they call it the law of gravity. They have a superstition about how life came about, and they call it evolution. These are superstitions, and they have no scientific basis whatsoever. They have a superstition about light. And light travels at a fast speed. These things are just not any scientific basis for what's ever, but we get these things pounded in our head day after day after day by McDoo-Doo, McDonald, and Dairy Queer until we start believing these things because it's pounded in our heads. These are superstitions. We believe that we catch a cold. We're so healthy that we catch a cold. Then we get sick for 3 days and we get rid of the cold. You get sick and get rid of the cold, but you're healthy and you catch a cold. I mean, after a while the thing just doesn't add up. You cannot see the wind, you can only see what the wind does. You cannot see light. Light is energy. You only see that energy acting on the environment, and that energy acting on the environment is what you call light. But I know you've been taught these things. So a lot of things I'll be saying to you, I'll clear up in the question and answer portion of what I'm talking about. Now, we have what is called biochemical imbalance. Biochemical imbalances are caused by drugs. So we have some things that are classified as foods that are drugs. And anytime you take a drug, it causes a biochemical imbalance. If you take a drug and it causes the lungs to get toxic and accumulate waste, it also causes an emotional side to it. The emotional side to that is unforgiveness, unstable. When your lungs are ill, you're unstable, you have unforgiveness, and you have denial. That's what the emotional response to the lungs is. Kidney disease will cause anger, fear. This is what happens to the kidney when the kidney gets toxic, you see. And the liver also gets toxic. And that causes a certain emotional response in your body. Because each disease has an emotional response. Because the brain is in your body, and the brain is reacting to these chemicals. When you limit the chemicals that the brain gets, it limits the brain's responses to reality. Caused by chemicals, which we do not classify as chemicals. We do not do that because we were taught that certain things are foods by the United States government, which in itself is another force. But the Food and Drug Administration comes under the Treasury Department, which is a private corporation which monitors the flow of money in the Food and Drug Administration. Just monitors the flow of money in the food industry and drug industry. It's not there to protect you, and it doesn't do that. Nonetheless, we were told that salt is a food. Llaila, you ready?
Yeah, just about.
We were told that salt is a food. Sodium chloride is a pure, and it is toxic. It dehydrates the prostate, it dehydrates the uterus. Because sodium chloride is a drug. Sugar is another drug. It's very toxic. It causes the blood cells to get weak and they explode and hemorrhage. That's two drugs I mentioned that were classified as food. Then we have this other drug called bleach white flour, which is milled, and once it's milled, it's cooked. And when you buy it, it's already cooked. And it doesn't have any vitamins and minerals in it. And it is a drug, and it causes a drug reaction in your body. And therefore, it taxes your liver, and therefore, it's going to cause you to have some tendencies of unforgiveness or anger, you see, because certain drugs cause certain actions in your body, just like cocaine causes a certain action. White sugar, bleach white flour, and salt cause a reaction in your body. We have biochemical causes for diseases. We have behavioral chemically caused diseases, and we have emotionally caused chemical diseases, and we call those mood and thought disorders. I'm just going over this thing rather rough, but I'm going to break it down to you. So we can alleviate the chemical causes of homosexuality by simply balancing the diet. If we put a person on a raw juice diet for 3 days or to 5 days, that will cleanse the system totally. That will biochemically get
the craving out of the system. My wife, Asila, she's right there. Asila is about 3 days on some raw juice, basically. What kind of juice would be good for something like that? Cleansing. Usually say carrot juice and beets and something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Usually it's carrot and beet juice or burdock, something of that sort that's going to cleanse out the toxins out of the system. So we can basically get rid of that disorder that way. We can get rid of any addiction in 3 to 5 days on raw juice. But see, what we have now is a cascade effect of addiction. Because people have addictive behavior, and they have addictive thoughts and addictive emotions. So all of those things have to be combined when you're treating someone with homosexuality. You have to look at whether you're treating them on an outpatient basis or inpatient basis. If it's outpatient, the homosexual is trying to get rid of the disease, needs the support of the family and then their friends. They need a mentor. They need an elder to talk with. And they must attend a history group, study group. They must attend a women's group if it's a female, or a men's group if it's a man. Those things have to happen because we have to go back to the source of a society that creates this condition through a social behavior. You see, so we have that going on. Now we can use certain things to also nullify the craving on a chemical level, like glutamine, which some people call it glutamic acid. A person needs about 2,000 milligrams on an empty stomach or in between meals at least 2 times or 3 times a day. That will nullify the craving chemically, because people crave certain behavior. You have certain signs and symptoms of homosexuality. Just like you have signs and symptoms of any disease. You say a person has a cold, you see the nose running, and you see they have a little redness and a little temperature. Those are signs and symptoms of what people call a cold. And just like any other disease, homosexuality has signs and symptoms. That's a person that will have sex without an urge or desire for it, just have sex. They will sometimes go on sex binges, just having a lot of sex. That's a sex binge. You see, they use sex to medicate themselves. If they feel hurt, angry, or frustrated, they will use sex to self-medicate, you see. And also they visualize in homosexuality, you having sex with yourself. Because it's a man having sex with a man, a woman having sex with a woman, that's having sex with yourself. That's the only thing you can control is yourself. So that reinforces ownership and control, which comes out of the social condition that the person has when they don't have any ownership or any control. You see? So that they have another image of what a man and what a woman is about. So we have to create another image. See, it's an imaging disease also. Black folks are used to imaging things. We have to picture how to walk and how to talk and how to prepare food. We have to image this because we think in images. We don't think in sentences. We think in images. We dream in images. We don't dream in words. So we have to create another image in the person's mind and get rid of that old image of what a man and what a woman is. And this imaging process occurs in what I mentioned before, a study group, a modern kind of discussion, a women's group, a men's group to re-image in the mind. You see, so a person has certain signs and symptoms of homosexuality and that they find pleasure in violence in connection to sex. So they look at those violence in connection of sex, songs, videos, movies. That is an illogical connection, violence connected with sex. But that's coming out of another culture. So we have to, the person on detox from homosexuality cannot look at these kind of music videos or movies or television shows or listen to these kind of songs that denigrate, that inferiorize and victimizes people of the sex. A man victimizing a woman or inferiorizing her. You can't look at those anymore. So the person basically has to be taken off of those kind of reinforcing imagings that are put in the mind. So that I'm talking about none of those movies, those current things that people call entertainment. Those reinforce homosexuality. So we have to come off of those movies. We have to be involved in the study groups. We have to go into raw juice. We have certain amino acids I mentioned before, glutamic acid, glutamine. We have dopa, which is used, D-L-phenylalanine, which is another amino acid which is used to steady the nerves And then we have herbs like feverfew, which steadies the nerves. We have to steady the nerves and balance the hormone level. The man has to take a lot of estrogen. So he has to go into some dung qua. You see. The system is stimulated. The anatomy of the system is such as this. Inside of the female's body is stimulated and controlled by estrogen. The outside of the body is stimulated and controlled by testosterone. The labia minora and labia majora and the clitoris is stimulated by the male hormones. The outside is stimulated by male hormones, the inside is stimulated by female hormones, and it's the direct opposite in the men's system. What we have been conditioned to is a system based on sympathetic nervous response to sexuality, which is taught to us during seasoning. I think I'm losing some people. I'll break this thing down. I'm not going to lose anybody in this whole, we're going to go step by step, and I'm not going to lose anybody, okay? Now then, so let me finish with a dietary perspective, and we're going to use such herbs, as I mentioned before, like feverfew, which strengthens the nerves. We got to strengthen the nervous system. We got to reorder the hormone level with some dung qua or blessed thistle when we're dealing with the man, and the same thing with the woman. She has to take the sarsaparilla, because the sarsaparilla stimulates the outside of the female system. You see, so we into recreating a hormone balance. They have to go on some hormone toners, as you call it. So those ones that they say the sexual stimulus for men, you see all these kind of names for men only, Pow Pack and all that kind of names that the Europeans give them. We have to get those toners. The female takes her toners, the man takes his toners, along with the glutamic acid I mentioned. We have to alkaline the system, because once the system's acidic, the system craves. The system will crave anything once it's acidic. It will crave alcohol, cigarettes, sex. So the system has to remain alkaline. That's with things, alkalining foods like a herb like fennel. Some people use that to keep the system alkaline. Some people use slippery elm. Some people use a baked potato with the skin just to alkaline the system, because we're trying to keep the system alkaline. In other words, we're trying to reorientate the diet. Once the diet is carbohydrate centered, then it's alkaline. But if it's meat and dairy centered, then it's acidic. And an acidic state will cause a craving. Meat and milk and dairy products and all drugs, white sugar, bleached white flour, salt, makes the system acidic. And by making the system acidic, it craves. So we have to alkaline the system. Those are nutritional kind of things I'm just going into, not trying to rush into the whole perspective here. Now, when I was mentioning the phases of sex, first let me just break down the phases of it, because we were forced to go into what we call a sympathetic sexual response, because that's all that's needed to breed. You can't go into an ISIS response, because ISIS response takes you into another spiritual level, you see, because it's the sexual system, the physiological response goes sympathetic and then parasympathetic, and it has steps to it of the response. I'm just going into the physical response. I'm just going to go step by step with that. Let me write it on the board first. Okay. Everyone can see? Okay. Good. Now, what happens is the person's breathing response increases. When your breathing increases, that causes your large intestines to be down. You can't have both of them at the same time. So the large intestine basically is at rest. So the large intestines is at rest. I usually put LI, but I don't want to lose anybody. This is a thyroid response. Then your heart's beating rapidly, you know, stars are shining in Alabama, or whatever happens, I don't really know. Then that causes your small intestines to be at rest. That is response of your thymus gland. Oops, I guess I need my famous eraser. I know you've all had this in school, so I can rush right through it. Let's see, how much time do I have? I don't want to hold y'all up here. Now we're going into the pancreas, which causes the sugar to be secreted. And when the pancreas is working, the stomach's at rest. So far, all we have accomplished here, we're into a sympathetic sexual response, which is called an Osirian response. We haven't gone into an Isis response yet. Follow me. I want to say this, that this kind of response was generated during seasoning, what you call slavery, where we were forced to mate with each other. Because we're not supposed to have sex, according to our culture, when there's a storm, or during a solstice, or when you're angry, or just when you finish eating. You're supposed to have sex 4 hours after you finish eating. You see, a lot of things that we did before we came over here was taken away from them. Our culture was denied us. So a lot of those responses were taken away. So this is what is the result of that. This is the seasoning process of breeding. And a lot of us haven't escaped that, by the way. Hands, or relaxes, as they say. So the man goes up in his orgasm response and reaches the threshold right there, and then that's the end. You see. The orgasmic response in the female makes a curve. It's gradual and goes up, and this phase right here may stay, as you can see, much longer than this little peak here. So in this phase, which some people classify as an orgasmic phase, the female stays in that a long time. And as you see, it may look like a little contradiction here, that bell curve and this sharp here. You see that? You say that's not compatible, that's not making it. But what makes this thing compatible is what they call petting. That's what balances the systems in the orgasmic level. Now we've done the physical and the glands and the orgasmic response and all that. We also know that let me go back a little bit here. Well, people understand that when their lips swell up, the labia minora and labia majora during sexual intercourse swell up too. You understand that. You understand that the man's and the woman's nipples get erect, and the clitoris gets erect. We understand that too. We understand also that when you reach in this orgasmic level, the hair on your back stands up. We understand that too. So we have these similar kind of responses in each one of the systems that we sometimes ignore because we're into the breeding part of sex. And we're not into, all of this was taught during your rites of passage now. All of us were taught this when we went through our rites of passage, right? We were taught how to exercise our vaginal muscles. The man was taught how to make his testicles go up and down. That's what you were taught in your rites of passage. You're taught that your uterus and prostrate is on a solar cycle, and your ovaries and testicles are on a lunar cycle. We were taught that during our rites of passage. See, a lot of things were denied us, and that's why we're in the predicament we're in, because we don't even understand this whole process. We absolutely believe that the mother feeds the baby with breast milk and gives the baby immunity. Now wait a minute. Let me see. In order for the mother to give the baby immunity, that would take a transplant, because the mother's cell would have to become part of the baby's cell. So we know there's no transplant. So what we do know is that the mother's milk stimulates the immunity already present in the baby. See, I'm moving away from superstition and getting more into what's actually happening here. I'm telling you that if you eat an apple or orange, it doesn't become a part of your body. The orange only stimulates the vitamin C already in your body. I'm telling you that. I know you've been taught the superstition about you can eat vitamin C from an orange. I know you've been taught this, because I was taught it too. The same people that fed me milk and Spam and all that stuff taught me that ignorance too, but it's impossible. You can't get anything from an apple. The apple can only stimulate something that's already present in your system. You see? So let's remember now, we're moving away from a lot of ignorance here and a quick thing here. But we have to be taught confusion, because we have to be taught a contradiction goes together. Now let's look at the people who have taught us that, to know what I'm talking about. We're talking about the gayness, the people that came from gayness, and gayness established what you call gangs. And gangs are loose groups of people. I'm talking about European people. They had gayness, and these gayness is what you call gangs. And they have criteria of the way women were socialized, because it's based on the fragmentation of the family. Because detoxing someone from homosexuality without the family is not going to work, because you're just taking them back into fragmentation. The foundation of the social system we're dealing with is homosexuality. That you have to understand. You have to understand that Hippocrates was a faggot. You have to understand that. The foundation for the medicine was homosexuality. You have to understand that King James was a homosexual. You have to understand the foundation for that religion is homosexuality. You have to understand that when you see the homosexuals in the church, it can't be any other way, because the foundation of that religion came from homosexuality. You have to understand that, or we're all lost. Now, the way the family was fragmented, George Washington was also a homosexual. You're looking at me, I don't believe my master could have been faggot. I don't believe that. No, George Washington was homosexual too. So was Socrates, so was Plato. So was what's this other woman, Florence Nightingale. Loaded with syphilis, died from syphilis. She was treating the men all right. It was Mary Seacole from Jamaica who was the real Florence Nightingale. She was the one who saved them during the Crimean War. That's who the British called in. Florence came there one day and had to leave. For other reasons. But I'm just trying to point these things out. We have to understand that this system that we're dealing with is founded on dysfunctional families. It's founded, the European society is founded on dysfunctional families and self-hatred. Europeans hate themselves. They hate their skin, they hate their hair, they hate the way they dance, they hate the way they walk. That's why they copy everything we do. In order to teach you to play the piano, I must know how to play the piano. In order to teach you how to hate yourself, I must first hate myself. And the Europeans hate themselves. They have dysfunctional families, and if you stay around them, you'll have dysfunctional families, you'll hate yourself, and you'll be homosexual too, because that is the foundation of their civilization. You have to understand that. You have to walk away from those people, if you want to call them that. They say they're monkeys. I agree with them. But in any case, what I'm trying to say is the gayness. The gayness is the foundation for their civilization, which you call a gang. And they have, the way they fragment this is, they have fragmented roles for women in European society. They even have them today. Now, the woman was classified as a breeder. They had women that just breed children. They had women that were just prostitutes, and they still have them today. They had concubines. This is the woman that they went places with. Like the white men go to lunch with their secretary and that sort of thing. They have their concubines, they have their prostitutes, and they have their breeders, which you call their wife. And they have their lover, which is always another man. That is the foundation of their civilization, because the men in Caucasian society do not trust the women. They only trust the men. Their armies were always solidified and strengthened because they were based on homosexuality. when the king and the queens and all these emperors were afraid of losing their power, they had to destroy the gym, the gymnasium. The gymnasium was exclusive for men only, where they had certain homosexual activities at the gymnasium. The word means naked. And that's what they did at the gymnasiums and the arenas and the baths. You see written on the walls in Greek civilization. You go there today, Claudius loves Miss Servius. You know, it's not Claudius loves a woman. It's just, you know, it's written on their walls today. So we have a civilization where the gyms were the foundation of that, and they used to go looking for their little boy lovers because the boys were turned over into the homosexual cult when they're 5 or 7 years old. And the boys were turned over to that, and then they were picked. And when they were picked and did good things, they would pat them on the behind. See, it's no accident why they're still patting men on the behind, because that comes from Greek civilization. See, you don't know your white history. That's the problem here. And that's how the divisions of the women was. Breeder, prostitute, you see, and concubine. And the principal relationship for the man was always the lover. The women would go to Lesbo Island. That's where you get the word lesbian from. And they had the same division because they do not trust the men. And they do not understand their children. They used to eat their children. They sold traps for their children. Up to the 18th century, read Race and Civilization. There are recipes on how to cook children. See, you do not know your white history. And someone tells you, I don't believe my master could be that bad. I don't believe my master's sick. You know, no, your master is very sick. Someone would enslave another people has to be screwed up in their mind. And you have to recognize that. And if you keep duplicating them and follow them in any way, you're going to get this disease of theirs, because they cannot separate these things like you do. If you learn how to obey a white person, you simultaneously learn how to disobey a black person, because it's one and the same lesson. It's one and the same lesson. That's why you see black people work so well with white people, and they start working for you and say, Jesus, I know they know how to work. I know they know. I see them working for white people. Yes, because simultaneously they taught not to work for you. In any case, let's go back to their family structure, which you are trying to duplicate. Because we didn't have cousins and aunts and uncles in African family structure. We just had mothers and fathers. And all the children were brothers and sisters. We had what they call a parallel structure, where the Europeans have a vertical structure. You see, we have parallel mothers. Every woman in here would be a mother. And if the woman was married, she could also be a father. My sister would be my son's father, mother. See, we didn't have this aunts and uncle thing. Everyone was assigned a role in the holistic aspect of the family. So that family structure lends itself to fragmentation and individualism, and I do my own thing. Because it's always going to duplicate the fragmentation of behavior as lover, breeder, concubine, and prostitute. The women had the same structure. They would go to Lesbo Island and do their thing there. And that's where you get this term lesbian from Lesbo. And there are books on this, Greek books and Roman books and all that sort of thing, if you want to be listening and reading that disease stuff. But I'm just trying to say that it's built in their structure for these things to happen, which you think is very accidental. You think it's very accidental that there's a big plague of homosexuality with African people. It's not no accident. It is built into their structure. As I mentioned before, at the pat on the behind at the games, at football and basketball games, that comes from their homosexual gymnasiums. That's part of the rituals there. That's the subtle cascade, subliminal part that supports the homosexual system. Just like saying pissed off is the same thing. That comes from Pisces or Pysius. Pysius was a man in Greece who had another man as a lover. And a woman tried to take one of the men and marry one of the guys. So the other guy got pissed off. Pysius got angry, so they said, when something like that happens to you, they say you're pissed off. That comes from homosexuality. When a woman tries to take another man's man. Sick. But you're reinforcing this and you're saying, oh, I get pissed off. And I wonder, I don't know what's going to happen, so I just guard myself. I don't know what's going on around. Yeah. But I'm trying to say this is a social structure here that has it built in it. And you have to be aware of it. There's no escaping it. It's in their legal system. It's in their judiciary system. It's often been said that you do more time in certain gay cities, a man that slaps a woman and a man that slaps a man will do more time in Atlanta if you slap a man than if you slap a woman. Because you're going in front of a homosexual judge. So you're better off slapping a woman. That's always been known in certain homosexual orientated cities. It's very insidious disease where a man enjoys having sex with a bowel movement. You see, you have to be in a certain mindset that have this kind of psychological support. But no one is supporting anyone that wants to get away from this disease that they have contracted. We just reinforce it, but we're not supporting, say, someone wants to actually get away from this disease. There's no mechanism. We have to understand, we have to be very supportive. Just as someone is on crack or cocaine or incarcerated, we have to support them through this struggle. Someone wants to get away from it, you know, there's no supporting mechanism. We have a council of elders, we have mentors, we have study groups already intact. And we have to use those history groups, the study groups, the men's groups, the women's groups that are already intact to help this come about. There's no need of trying to invent the wheel is already here. So let's go back to this whole social structure. See, let us look at someone who's born with a hormone addiction. First of all, we don't diagnose hormone addictions. People are born addicted to hormones. They get the hormones from the Big Mac. And they only feel stimulation when they eat meat. They get a stimulation from the chemicals in the meat, the hormones in the meat. It's not the meat that stimulates them. Meat, if you soak it in some salt or something, is just white, chalky, pasty stuff. It has no taste. You pull out all the blood and eat, that's what you would have, the protein. And you can soak all the blood out with some salt or some solution like that, and you would have a white, pasty, chalky tasting substance. That would be the protein. That would be what the people claim they're eating the meat for. It would not give them the stimulation. What gives it the wonderful taste is when you cook the blood and you get the snot and the mucus, and that gives the meat the wonderful taste. Cooked blood and pus, you know, that's the taste. And what gives them the stimulation is the hormones, the besterones that are put in the cattle and the fish and the chicken. And that's what gives them the energy from eating the meat. You see. So, but we're taught in this contradiction thing. See, it's very stimulating to the sexual system when your body is acidic. It's very stimulating. Say if you take some alcohol, and then you drink the alcohol, then you get this warm glow and you get this feeling. Well, that warm glow and that feeling is your body's defenses coming at the alcohol to get it out your body. So all you feel is the body's defense reaction to the alcohol. You see, and you call that getting high. So if you put the acidic, you have a high acid level in your pelvic girdle from eating meat and dairy products and all this bleach white flour. It's very highly acidic in the pelvic girdle where your reproductive organs are. The body tries to get rid of that waste. And when the body is coming to get rid of it, the person gets sexually stimulated. So most people are just getting sexually stimulated because they're constipated. And they got a lot of toxicity down there, and the body's trying to get rid of it, and they call that stimulation. That's just a disease reaction. But see, we're putting things together that don't go together. We're doing a lot of that here, you see. So it's like a biochemical response, then we got a social chemical response, then we got a mood and thought disorder response. Because once you put the chemicals in the system, the natural pathway is then blocked. So when you have emotional thoughts that are going down the emotional pathway, they get diverted and go down the violence pathway. Then you got violence thoughts that go down the violent nervous transmission pathway. It gets distorted and goes to the sex organs. That's why people get aroused to see violence. You see, they go for the destruction of the sex. It's subtle things. Frances Cress Welsing gets into it quite well. Subtle little things. Well, you see all of these vaginas on a scoreboard. These circles, these O's that has a symbol meaning of a woman's vagina. You see, and you see all these O's there, and then the objective is to get rid of the uterus. When you score, you get rid of the uterus. See, all of this is subtle cascading effect, subliminal suggestion, as some people call it, that supports homosexuality. And you don't see all the supports that are going on. The diet does it alone. The toxic chemical effect of the diet does it alone. So I'm hitting on, just skipping back and forth on a lot of things, but I'm trying to let you be aware that there's an epidemic, and it's spreading, and it's not stopping, because we are looking at it as a matter of sexual choice. A person that has freedom of choice can only have freedom of choice if that choice is supported by a group. You have to have a group to have individual freedom. Without the power of group, you have no individual freedom. Freedom of choice is a privilege granted by a group. You see. Without a group, you have no freedom of choice. You're only free to choose the wrong thing in this society. You can choose a white thing, which is the wrong thing. But you're free to choose that. You say, well, I want to go to have a job here, I want to work there, I want to go to this school. As long as those are white jobs and white schools, you're free to do it. But you say, no, I want to go to this African school, and I want to work on, no, you can't do that, you see. Because the first place, you say, I want to go to this school. You come here, and I teach you about this, and I say, well, I'm going to give you a diploma in homosexuality. You're certified to counsel homosexuality. You say, you're free to do that. You say, you take your diploma someplace and say, no, no, that diploma doesn't count here. The only one that counts here is white diploma. So you wouldn't come here anymore. You say, what? So your choice, your freedom of choice, you don't even have. Because they take it away from you. They take it away from you simply by teaching you what to think and what not to think. See, I am supposedly, since I'm in medicine and that sort of thing, I am a scientist. And I talk about science. And people look at me and say, I know what science is. Okay. Astronomy, archaeology, and anthropology are not sciences. They are observations. Astronomy is how you observe the stars. Archaeology is when you observe the structures of a civilization. Anthropology is when you're observing the behavior of past civilization, how they act. Those are observations. That's not a science. It's no more than a science than you watching a bus going up and down the street. You're just making an observation. That's not a science. To a European, it's a science, yeah, but it's not a science. If I'm trying to explain how to put this chair together here, and I say, well, see, you measure 8 inches that way and 8 inches that way, I'm explaining it. Mathematics is simply an explanation. Mathematics is not a science. Mathematics helps me to explain something, but mathematics in itself is not a science. Philosophy helps me explain spirituality or something about a social group. But philosophy is not a science. But to a European, everything's a science. So we are taught something is a science is not even a science. So you're like, what is a science then? You know, yeah, what is a science? Well, you know, science is the study of melanin. You know, when you study biology, you're studying the nucleus in the cell, and that's melanin. So when you're studying melanin, that's science. When you're studying melanin particles that vibrate around the cell, that's called chemistry. So you're studying melanin. You're studying electrons, protons, neutrons, and solitons. And I'm talking about solitons. That's science. When you're studying melanin, you're studying science. And the only way you can know science is to know God. And the only way you can know God is to be spiritual. So the science of spirituality is the only science I know. My art is a science. And that's what I'm talking about. The science is the only science I know of is when you're studying melanin. Anything else is just a superstition of a group of people. So now we all know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about science, right? Okay. Now let me go back into this quite quickly to move on, because I don't want to, bombard you with a whole lot of information. I know that people have this orientation about sex. When is a brother going to get down with the sex thing? I'm getting down with it in an African sense. I know you can see the vitality of the female system and the male system. You can actually see that. If you want to see how much vitality a man has, you look at his erection. Now, I don't mean, say, brother, pull it out. I don't mean that. I mean, this is how a man can tell the vitality of his system. When a boy is young, his penis is erect and he can pee in his face. But when the sexual system loses its vitality, the penis starts going down. If a man gets erect and his penis is pointing to the ground, his vitality of the system is just about gone. Because the more vitality, the higher up the erection will be. I know you already know that. See, the organic structure of the system is like this. If you were to use the four divinities, which you call north, south, east, and west, or earth, or water, air, and fire, a woman's system goes from earth, then water, then air, then fire. A man's system doesn't go that way. A man's system goes to earth, then air, then water, then fire. That's the elemental division of the two systems. Now I'm just talking science right now. I don't know what you've been taught, but I know we've been orientated towards sex from a disease perspective. Totally from a disease perspective. It is viewed as sexually attractive when a person has red cheeks. That is a B vitamin deficiency. When you have thinning of the lower eyelids, which they make dark, that represents the decrease of vitality of the female system. See, these are indicators of what's going on with the body, but we've been orientated toward health by diseased people. Now, we know that when you have claws, they were used to help eat and as weapons of defense. And when you put blood on the claws are sexually attractive. And that's why the European women grow these long claws and paint them red. Fingernails, as you call them. See, the Caucasian man could not deal with the woman until he masculized her. The men wore the ruffles and those little laces. Men wore that. White men wore the ruffles and the laces and the skirts and the wigs. They wore all of that. And the dresses. They wore that. And the high heels. They wore that. Henry VII started the high heels. White men wore the high heels, the dress, the laces, all of that frivolous stuff and the curly hair and the lipstick. They wore that. But they couldn't deal with the white woman until they masculinized her. And that's why they made her put on the dress, put on the high heels. You get the point? Because they could only have sex with another man. They had to image her as a man in order to deal with her. This thing is sicker than what you think. It really is. And when the boys were at the arenas and the gymnasiums, they used to advertise their wares. And they would wear what you call a bikini. That's the outfit of the boys during Greece when they would be in the gyms advertising their wares. The bikini. So what do they do to their women? They masculinize her and make her put on the bikini. Because they can't deal with her until she puts on the man's clothes. What makes cleavage so sexy amongst white men? The cleavage is when you show the top of the breast. You know what I'm talking about, brothers? When you can see the top of the woman's breast when she has on these low-cut dresses. Is anybody following me? Okay. So the reason why that's sexually attractive because it looks like the behind. It looks like the behind. If you look at the top behind and look at the top of a woman's breast, that's what makes it attractive to the man. You're not getting this. You're really not getting how sick the people are that we're dealing with, that we're imitating. I'm very sorry. Okay. Praise the Lord. I'm just trying to talk to my brothers and sisters here. Okay. So now I mentioned about having an acidic pelvic girdle and how that's sexually stimulating. Because the toxic waste down there causes the body to have a biochemical reaction to get rid of the toxic waste. And when the body's trying to get rid of that toxic waste, it stimulates the sex organs. We have something that's called plaque, which is snot, and the snot gets thick, and they call it plaque, collects on the teeth, collects in the digestive tract, and people brush 1 inch of plaque out of their mouth and leave the 30 feet of the rest of it in their body. You know, that makes a lot of sense, you know. But in any case, you get this plaque, and the plaque collects in the muscles. And the plaque oxidizes, I mean, it gets harder. And when it gets harder inside the muscle by the fiber, they say it's fibro-like. And when you want to say something is fiber-like, you call it a fibroid. And that's waste that's trapped in the uterus from the accumulation of waste in the whole system. And the same thing happens with the prostrate. The prostrate accumulates waste and gets weak, and it reaches threshold. I mean, the blood engorges it too fast, and once it reaches threshold, it collapses, and that man has what we call premature ejaculation, simply because of deterioration of the system. You see, it's the plaque. That same little slime gets in the eyes, and we call that glaucoma or cataracts. But it's the same waste. It's just in different locations. And the Europeans play location names with you. When you get the waste in your eyes, it's cataract. You get the waste in your veins, it's varicose veins. You follow? They play location thing on you so they can change prescriptions and make some money here. You get the waste in between your bones, we call it arthritis. You get the waste in your muscles, we call it rheumatism. You get the waste in your teeth, and we call it pyorrhea, which is arthritis in the mouth. Same thing. It's just a location name. So we getting into this whole thing about homosexuality, and you're seeing it as separate things, but it's one and the same thing. I think you've often heard this from Dr. Clark, everybody, divided you're conquered. If you see this divided, you're conquered. That's what I'm trying to tell you. If you see homosexuality as something separate from the legal system, something separate from the medical system, something separate from all of these systems, you are conquered, because it's one and the same. It's built in the system. The French always raped the men first when they were practicing slavery. That's what they did first. Don't you understand those? Oh, man. I don't even want to get into how the Europeans deal with animals. That's another subject. I don't even want to get into that. But all I'm just trying to say is that you have to look at where this disease is coming from. They masculinized the woman, and then the woman had to take on hairstyles of animals to make herself attractive. They had the goat hairstyle where they part the hair in the center that way because they wanted the strength of the goat. Then they had the sheep hairstyle, which you call curly hair. This is the hairstyles that white women have. They patterned them after the animals that the Europeans used to sleep with as a preventive medicine. It's in a book called Dirt and Other Books by Terence McLaughlin. See, they used to sleep with animals because they used the fumes of animals to protect them from diseases. See, when they sat on the toilet, it was like an antibiotic for them. They figured the fumes from their bowel movement would keep all other funky diseases away from them. So they would just sit and funk for a while on the toilet. And they thought that would like protect them from disease. It had nothing to do with a bowel movement like you think, because they used to eat, drink, and fix their food in the same water they had bowel movements and urinate in, because they never associated that with hygiene. Semmelweis went crazy trying to tell white people to wash their hands. They didn't believe him. The man went insane trying to teach white people, medical doctors, to wash their hands before they go from one patient to another. They wrote it down in their book. It's in my book. I mean, so they have certain masturbation rituals also that occur on the full moon, because they figure if you can become the master. See, it's part of initiation ceremonies that you go through in the homosexual cults. Once you become a master of your own spirit and your own soul, then you can masturbate. They didn't let anybody do that like they do today. Well, you shouldn't do it anyway. I'm just saying you had to be in a certain status before you could do it. Just like before you could put a ring in your ear, you had to complete your 32nd degree of your rites of passage. They didn't let anybody put their ring in the ear. You only see that in certain pharaohs' ears, that ring. The common person didn't do that because you had to complete a certain amount of growth and development before you could do that. And that was a symbolic thing. Now you find all kind of brothers with rings in the ears, and some of them use them half for lampshades and stuff hanging from the ear, you know. And I've lost the whole spiritual content of what it's about. So, but we get into this homosexuality which is built in the civilization itself. You have to walk away from European civilization and walk into African civilization to really be rid of this thing. You see, you have to walk away from European civilization. It is built in their civilization. They don't talk about it because it's part of their system. There's nothing to talk about to them. You're only looking at the tip of the iceberg when you see a gay white boy. That's just part of what the whole thing is about. That's the poor, that's the trash of the homosexuals. George Washington didn't do that, and he was gay as all whatever. He also was on junk food, rotted out his teeth, got a false wooden teeth, rotted them out too. Sugar drunk it. That's what he was. I'm going to go over some of these things a little slow because I realize that it's all a little new to us. Where is Gregory about? Because I'm going to show you some slides on this. Gregory? Excuse me for one moment. You see Gregory? I need the lights out. I'm going to show you some slides here. I have technical assistance from the brother. Yeah, all the way forward. Yeah. We're just going to do a few. I'm not going to overload you with them. Let's see where I'm at. Now, this is Secret of Regeneration. It's an old book, but it tells you the two. What? The microphone is off. Well, how do these things happen? Well, you can hear me, right? I'll just talk louder. Okay. We have a sexual regeneration because you have two phases of sex that's supposed to be practiced at all times. You have sexual regeneration and sexual reproduction. In other words, a brother ejaculates and a brother ejaculates. Ejaculation is when the orgasmic energy goes to the pineal gland and stimulates the pineal gland, and we call that regeneration or ejaculation because the semen is not released. That's when you send that energy up your spinal cord, up your backbone, all the way up to the center of your brain. The woman does the same thing too, and that's called regeneration. But that's when you ejaculate. That's when the energy is coming to your pineal gland. When you ejaculate, the energy is going from your pineal gland. But we are taught by confused people, so they tell us we're coming when we're actually going. Yeah. You see? Yeah. But there's two functions of the reproductive system, and that was part of the rites of passage. That's what kept us off of this homosexual trail, where we don't get into these sex binges and have sex and not even aroused. Because people do that. They have sex and not even aroused. That's one of the signs and symptoms of homosexuality. When you just have sex to have sex. And you don't even feel like having sex. You just have it. You see what I mean? That's a part of the training out of the homosexual cult. Now, remember I was telling you about the sympathetic response. That's just just half of the sexual activity. That's the part that the European wanted us to have during season, during slavery, because that's all they wanted was for us to breed. The more slaves, the more money. That routine. So they were not interested in that spiritual stuff. That's why they had to get the cowboys from Gambia to work on the pig farms, because the pigs were busy oink-oinking and having all their rituals and love stories and stuff, and the white man didn't have time for that. So he ain't one of them pigs to go ahead and pig on out so he could make some money. He would just want them to have sex. And he cut out the rituals with the cattle, with the pigs, and with the plants. Now, the systems are basically the same. They're all rhythmicity involved. African people have diseases of rhythmicity, where the organs are not firing in sequence in rhythmicity because of the acid state of our diet. When you have a highly acid diet, it causes deterioration of the pineal gland. By the time a white person is 7 years old, 30% of their pineal gland is not functioning. When they reach 18, it's 80% of their pineal gland is not functioning. And if you follow a white person's diet, you're going to kill your pineal gland. When they get older, they have calcification of the corpus callosum. That's the part that divides your left brain and right brain in half. That little skin in there gets hard and stops the transmission between the left and right hemisphere. African people have the largest corpus callosum. That means we have more communication between the left brain and right brain. We have one mind. We have one mind. We're not right-minded or left-minded. We're one-minded from one God. There's no other way we can be. But when you have deterioration of that dividing part, it gets very hard, and it stops the messages from going back and forth. And they call it a melanin deficiency, which is caused by acid diet. It causes your pineal gland to not function, and when it does function, it misfires. It's a disease of rhythmicity. You can use things to regenerate the pineal gland. You can go into herbs like echinacea, increase the blood perfusion to the brain with ginkgo, gota cola, rosemary, and things that work on the glands. Just look under glands, look under females. All their herbs are usually gland orientated. Take some of those herbs, cleanse the pineal gland, golden seal, echinacea, work on it, because you're losing the rhythmicity of your system, and our system is based on rhythm, which is called laws, which is called osirian. It's law and order. The pineal gland is law and order. Now, where the pineal gland sits is in the third ventricle. Inside of the third ventricle, you have the hypothalamus, the glands that control thirst and hunger and all that sort of thing. And sitting over top of the pineal gland is this buzzing, hovering thing that the white boys don't know what the hell it is. But it just sits there. And some people call it the third eye. It's not a gland, it's not blood, it's just something that just buzzes, just hovers there. And every time one of the planets moves, a particle of that cloud moves. We are totally connected to the whole world. The world to us is in our inner space. The world to the European is outer space. We just go inside and we can contact the Osirian complex. That's how the Dogons did it. It's in our inner space. God is in us. It's in our inner space. But to the European, it's outer space. Now, this is the pineal gland. This is what deteriorates. When you have deterioration in the prostate or the uterus, you have crenation or shrinking of the pineal gland. If this pineal gland shrinks, your sexual response shrinks. And all this is caused by acidic diet. That bleach white flour, alcohol, vinegar, which is the same as alcohol, does the same damage to the system as alcohol. All these things are waste byproducts of eating meat and eating rotten food. Rotten food gives off these ammonias and all these vinegars, and people have a taste for those rotten foods because and that's why they want these vinegars, these ammonias, these salts. I know you think these foods are good food, but the Europeans are used to rotten food. You see, they cook meat, and the pus and blood from the meat falls on these hot coals, and then the dirt from the coal vaporizes, and they get the dirt in the meat. They like to eat dirt. They call it barbecue. That's the dirt from those rocks. They eat dirt. They like it. And if they can't get the dirt, then they want to eat smoke, so they smoke the meat. They get the smoke from the dirt, and they call that smoked ham. But see, you're not looking at it that way. You're looking at it because they taught you it's food, but that's rotten tasting stuff. Yogurt, cheese, all that's rotten food, and they like the taste of it. Beef jerk off or whatever it's called. They like the taste of that stuff. It's rotten food. Hardtack, dried fish, it's rotten, rancid, and they like it. They rotten and ferment the hops. They call it beer. That's rotten hops. Fermented wine, that's fermented rotten grapes. Don't you get it? They like rotten stuff. But they told you, oh, this tastes good, so you got to force yourself to like that. Your mouth doesn't get water if you see a 2-ton cow moo-mooing in the field, making grass farts. You know your mouth don't get water. You know drinking cow's milk it's not natural, because you can't look at a cow and get thirsty. I mean, be for real. I don't even want to get in it. But anyway. The vibrations, this pineal gland secretes melanin, and the melanin vibrates and produces colors. That's where the rainbow of colors comes from. It comes from your pineal gland, and each one of those colors vibrates to a certain light force. You are musical because of your pineal gland. You have rhythm because of your pineal gland. You are black because of your pineal gland, not because of the sun. The sun doesn't make you black. It's the pineal gland. If the sun made things black, then why isn't the apple and orange and leaf on every damn tree black? They've been in the sun just as long as you have, but you've been orientated to science by people that are superstitious, and that's a superstitious belief of theirs, that we are black because we stood in the sun. They've been standing in the sun too, but they don't have enough melanin, they don't have an active pineal gland, so they can't get dark. That's why they got to keep going at it, or whatever they do. I don't even want to talk about them. Anyway, these colors vibrate at a certain frequency, and they also vibrate, music notes vibrate at the same frequency as the colors. And these colors are made by the pineal gland, and these colors are classified as black. Our ancestors called all three of those colors black because they come out of the black family, the melanin family. And when you're treating homosexuality, you have to go to certain points on the ear. You want to go to the sympathetic nervous system and touch that point on the ear because we're trying to reduce the sympathetic response in the person. So we treat that part there. We'll go to the kidney. We'll treat the liver. These are points on the ear that we'll treat, and we'll treat the gonads with acupressure or acupuncture. We're treating these centers. We're treating right over here, the sympathetic. We're going over here. We're going to treat, well, sometimes it's a very toxic liver. That's true. We'll treat that, and we'll treat the gonads. There are 4 spots that you treat on the ear for all addictions. Addictions to sex, addiction to violence, addiction to homosexuality, addiction to coke, the same points.
Doctor, 2 slides back with the color band.
Yeah.
Is there a science that you come across with the kente cloth and the color bands that contain kente cloth and they correspond to anything like that?
Ask me that when I finish the slides, and I'll go into it.
Okay.
No problem. Let me go back to this rhythm thing. Now, as I mentioned before, the men and the women wore dresses in Africa. That has nothing to do with sexuality whatsoever. Men and women wore makeup. When men and women wore lipstick, dyed their fingernails, their toenails, the dress, we didn't associate that with sexuality. That's coming out of a different mindset. That's coming out of the European mind. You see, they associated that dress and all that with masculinity, with higher strength and powers. That's why the men wore the dress in European society first, and then they had to masculize a woman and put the dress on her and the high heels to have sex with her. And I'll show you why they did that. But nonetheless, we had a certain rhythmicity, a certain cycle that we followed, a certain law that we followed, and all this is translated into the vibration that comes from the milk. The vibrations from the milk coincide to the vibrations of the child, which I'm talking about is the nutrient level. Whenever the child needed more vitamin B6, the milk changes in the ladies, the milk production changes to match the nutrient need of the infant. But all that rhythmicity is violated once you start mating your youth with cows. So they lose the bond. They're no longer bonded to their mother, and when you're not bonded to your mother, you're not bonded to your culture. So how are you going to get some form of spirituality when they've taken that away from you and bond you with a cow while they nurse on the black woman's breast? So we have these certain laws. No animal has sex with a woman that's pregnant, not even a rat. I mean, be for real. I mean, not even a rat does this. I have a lot of problems explaining this to people because they're so attached to their master. They don't want to leave the plantation. They really don't. They think of some nice things they learned about slavery, and one of them is sex and eating pork. And they don't want to give up that part of the plantation. They really don't. They get an African name, put on a dashiki, and then they want to eat pig ears. That's not compatible. You can't drink a Coke and call yourself African. You can't do that. I have never heard of Queen of Shepsut or Imhotep or Ahmes or anybody stopping by Burger King. I never heard of this. Where are you getting this stuff from? Your slave master. It has nothing to do with our culture whatsoever. And that's all attached to the homosexuality because the food is shaped to reinforce sexism. The hot dog. I mean, you can wrap beef in any shape you want, but why they gotta wrap it in the penis shape and then put some semen mustard on it? I mean, this whole thing is exciting to the Caucasian. You don't get it. You don't get it that there's been a rise in homosexual couples since they think O.J. killed that faggot Goldman. You don't get it. You don't get it. The whole trial is sexually stimulating to them. You don't get it. There's been a rise in mixed couples since O.J. killed that white girl, because the white girl's kinky. They think that now a black man to kill over their thing. So they really after the brothers now, and vice versa. And Whoopi too. I'm just saying, you're not attaching the sexism to what they look at. To you, it's just entertainment. But remember, the gymnasiums is where they auctioned off and bought each other and made it up. The men made it up on their little cave sports, which you call wrestling and football, them cave games. That's very highly sexually stimulated to white dudes. They really like putting their hands under the man's behind to get the football or whatever ball they grab him for. It's very stimulating to them. But you see, you're not looking at it the way, because you're using that African mind, and it's getting me in trouble in this lecture. Because you got that African mind, you got your spirituality turned on, and you're looking for balance, and I'm trying to say, no, what I'm showing you is confusion. What I'm showing you is distortions of nature. What I'm showing you is something directly contrary to your nature, and you're in their nature. And that's why you're not out of your mind, you're out of their mind. Because homosexuality is out of their mind. It's not out of African mind. It's totally incompatible. But as I mentioned before, how certain organs fire off and cause certain emotional behavior, you can do this according to the zodiac even. You can relate this to certain energy force fields in your body by the stars, which they call the 12 steps of Jacob's ladder, the 12 halls of Osiris. All this goes into those stories that explain the body and nutrients and digestion and sexuality, which you call Isis and Haru. That story. That explains the digestive system. And the two divinities, which is Isis and Haru. The two divinities, which explains the four divinities, as I mentioned before, north, south, east, and west, or earth, air, fire, and water. Those are the four divinities. All that's built in that story. Just by teaching you that one story, and if you know that story, I can teach you all the rest of this stuff. Because everything is foundation off of that story. Now then, this is the oldest carving in history of sexual intercourse. I guess you can make out that that's a sister and a brother. Now, as I mentioned before, the stimulation of the pineal gland, when your cerebral spinal fluid, which is that liquid matter that goes in your ventricles, when I showed you the third ventricle, I call it the eye of Haru, that's brain fluid, which we call cerebral spinal fluid. It goes up and down your backbone. And I showed you those musical notes. And I showed you those colors. And you know that the obelisks in Africa are all tuned to notes. And every stone in those pyramids makes a note if you strike it. You know that it's all musical. And you know that the cerebral spinal fluid is tuned when it goes up the spinal column. Because each one of these bones vibrates at a different frequency, and it tunes the cerebral spinal fluid, because you are a walking musical instrument. Now then, the Europeans got the thing a little backwards here. Because, you know, they saw the elephant on the elephant. So they figured a way to get the strength of the elephant is for the white man to screw the other white man in his behind. Because that gives him that strength, because he's imitating these animals, because they're looking at it all physical. They're looking at it all physical when they look at these poses here. Now, when you're looking at some kind of homosexuality of sorts, and you're looking at a person who has progressed in the disease state, you're going to see a line here at 11 o'clock. And you won't see a line down here by the testicles and ovaries. But you'll see one at 11 o'clock. They have this whole negative thing about the snake. And they have a positive thing about the snake in our culture. The caduceus, the two snakes, they shed their skin, and it represents rebirth and regeneration, where they get this negative thing in their culture about snakes, if you notice that. And they use it, if they're trying to pull a trick on you, they say they're snaking you or something of that sort. See, that's related to what they call penis envy. You remember that the whole sexuality of their family is kind of, as we call, screwed up. Because the father would rape the daughter raped the cat. You know, it gets all mixed up. And the mother raped the son, and, you know, they sexually abuse it. That's the word they use now. They sexually abuse their children. That's what they use now. That's right. But they've always done that. That is nothing new to Caucasian civilization. Nothing new at all. So they have all this cross-sexual relationships. And then they trade each other around like a thrift store. You know, they swapping each other, which they call wife swapping, husband swapping, and they call that promiscuous behavior, which was known as group sex. And group sex is known as an orgy. And they put these little immoral orgies on television, and they call them soap operas. And white women teach that, because white racism cannot function without the white woman. She's a codependent in that disease, and she teaches that. And they teach that on TV, this group sex, which is called an orgy, which has nothing to do with African culture. We're not into this group sex, just passing each other around. You know, the next one, the next one, this one don't work, the next one, the next one. You know how that goes. So they just pass each other around, where the white woman always wins in that pass around thing anyway. She always wins. Because if the white man dumped one white woman, he's going to get another white woman. And eventually he's going to die and leave the money to the white woman. And they know they're going to get the money in the end. And once they get the money, they share it with each other, the little lesbian white women. So they win every time. They love serial polygamy. Nonetheless, let's move on. As you know, excuse me, sister. Let me go back to the sister here. That the height of beauty was always, and it's still, the African woman. This is one of those kind of drawings where they're escorting this African woman from Africa to America to be enslaved. She's allegedly being escorted by white angels. You know, it's a sick drawing. But as I was mentioning before, everything's very congested down here in the pelvic girdle. You got the rectum here with the bowel movement in it. Usually people have about 10, 15 pounds of bowel manure caked up in there behind. They call it normal weight. So this toxic acid residue migrates to the penis, you see, and it's infiltrating this area, and this is what we call sexual stimulation. But there's certain stimulating points on the hands when you get into the sexuality of it all, on the hands. When I was little, guys used to come up and stick the girl on their kidney, and we thought that was really sexy, you know, when you could do that, you walk up to the girl, stick her right on the kidney, you know, that sort of thing. Y'all don't know anything about that. We used to do like that. Yeah, man. That was it. We knew we did something. Well, that comes from our old system of acupressure, which is part of the remnants which was left from our civilization, that acupressure. So your generative organ is this finger right here. And when you want somebody not to regenerate themselves, you do like this. Excuse me. I want y'all to listen. I'm not telling y'all anything. I'm just teaching something, okay? Stay right here. But that's what that means. That's your regenerative finger. So we have a remnants of that when they used to show those old voodoo dolls. Those are acupuncture points. That was a man practicing acupuncture with a witness, as we call it, because to stick the needle in someone is violation of God. We never stuck the needles in anybody. We used to use a witness. And the exercises that women do are homosexual exercises. They reinforce the whole system. The exercises for women have to be totally different. They're more expansive, they're more flowing, they're more this way. When you start doing those aggressive exercises that men do, that reinforces the homosexuality. Because the men don't see you sexual as a sexual person until you imitating them. So when you're doing that sexual exercise, exercising like them, then they look at you in the gym and say you're sexy. But if you're doing a woman's exercise, they ain't gonna like that. Not at all. So they want you to do male exercises. And I was talking about their brain, but I really didn't get into the whole way the brain functions and the way they order time and events and things of that sort. And that's why I was saying it's very important when a person's detoxing from homosexuality for them to get in a study group or a men's group or a women's group to get this re-imaging of their sexuality. And the sexuality is defined by your spirituality. See, a man and a woman are defined by their spiritual makeup in African culture. But a man and a woman in European culture is what kind of sex organs you have. Because that's how they define each other. So we got to get away from that definition and go into a modern kind of definition of ourselves and our purpose in life, which we call spirituality. But I was talking about a lot of us already know about they can't dance. You know, you see them and you say, oh, they can't dance, and we don't understand that dancing involves the pineal gland. Dancing involves you counting. You inherently count the rhythm of your heart, and you count the rest of the heart as one beat. The heart beats, and then it rests, that's 2 beats, and then it beats again, that's 3 beats. You see? So we dance in 3. The Europeans only count what they hear. They don't count the rest. So they dance in 2, we dance in 3. And that's why they're out of step. Because they don't dance to the silent beat. They only dance to the beat that they hear. And dancing and seeing and hearing is culturally mediated anyway. You're taught how to hear and how to see by your mother. That's a cultural thing. You're taught what sounds to like and what sounds to dislike by your culture. As I mentioned before, their whole reasoning and whole thing about sexuality is totally different. Totally different. They masculinize the woman with anal sex because they have to treat the woman as a man to enjoy her. You follow me? Now, as I mentioned before, you cannot have one without the other. If you're taught how to obey white people, you're simultaneously taught how to disobey black people. You cannot have one without the other. If you're taught sexuality by Europeans, you simultaneously taught homosexuality because they cannot have one without the other. You have to understand that. No matter how subtle it is, you're simultaneously taught that. That's why homosexuality is classified as normal, why eating disorder is classified as a disease. Now that is really messed up. That is because psychiatry was founded by a gay fellow. And he told the truth about his culture. That's Sigmund Freud, or whatever. Freud said that his people are sexually messed up. Freud said that the man wants to have sex with his son, the son wants to have sex with his mother. Freud said that. He said his people are sexually hung up, and you see it all around you. You see they have to sell toothpaste with sex, deodorant with sex, chewing gum with sex, toilet paper with sex. Everything is sold by sex. And you know it's something wrong with some people that can only appeal to themselves through sexuality. And now they're using children with sex. They have little children on TV with sexual poses selling soap, and apron, with towels and things. That's the sexual marketing to children. And if you let your child watch those shows, they will get hung up into the European idea of heterosexual sex, which is always accompanied by homosexual sex, because you cannot have one without the other in European civilization. You cannot have a rich white man without an enslaved black person somewhere on this continent. You cannot have one without the other. If you see it divided, you're conquered. It is not separated. You see, because we go through this thing and we just accept a lot of these contradictions as normal. Now look, if I explain this to you, you understand it. Now, you know you have to go to school for 4 years to understand how to eat, if you're stupid. But if you're African, you can get this in a couple seconds. Really. I mean, look. Now, if you go to the store and you get some processed flour, it's processed. I mean, it's processed by the mill, and they take out the fiber, they take out the B vitamins, they take out all the good nutrients and give you this white pasty stuff. So it's already processed when you buy it. Okay? You go to the store to get some white sugar. You know it comes from sugar cane, but they process the white sugar out of the sugar cane, take away the vitamins and minerals and the fiber, and all you get is this chemical that's left called white sugar. It's already processed when you get it. You know that. Now, you think about the body. Now, you know you have to eat 11 feet of sugar cane to get 3 teaspoons of sugar. You know that. So there's no way you can become a sugar drunk in nature. Because I don't think you're going to eat 11 feet of sugar cane. I don't think you're that hung up. But maybe you are. Oh, well. In any case, what I'm saying is the food is already processed when you get it. So, but if you eat sugar cane in its natural state, your body processes it. The liver does something to it, the pancreas does something to it, the digestive juice in your small intestine does something to it. Your body processes it. And the end result of this processing is a bowel movement. You follow me? The end result of processing is a bowel movement. Is everyone there? If you buy the sugar already processed and it's in your stomach, it starts out as a bowel movement because it's already processed. And that's what causes the problem. It's toxic waste when you eat it. You are eating, well, you know. It's already processed when you get it. But why people got to go to school for 4 years and figure this out is beyond me. But you understand that I'm telling you about his story about nutrition, his story about sex, and trying to get you to the human story about it, the African side of it all. And that's where we are. We're in the middle of that. Because we were enslaved, then we were colonized, and we were taught sexuality by white people. You have to remember that in Marseille, France, they still have African women's behind pickled in a jar in a museum. There's certain recipes that the slave masters had for eating a black woman's behind, cooking the black man's testicles and the labia. You've seen books where there's a white woman to come along after the brother's hung and cut off his penis, fix a little recipe with it. There's certain recipes for cooking and eating African people. White people like the behind. I showed you the behind with the elephant. I mean, you're looking at a buttock muscle and getting sexually aroused. Looking at a behind and thinking it's sexual is a European way of looking at a woman and a man. How can you look at something where the bowel movement come out and think it's sexy? I mean, that's totally, it's a European way of looking at each other's body. Because we are taught how to look from another culture's perspective, you see. That's why I'm saying you have to walk away from this European way of looking at the body and thinking and eating and go into an African way of looking at the body, thinking and eating. You cannot let them define what a disease is for you. You have to remember that they just started talking about 500 years ago. They haven't been talking that long. The highest thing for a person to do is to sing. Our children come out singing. Talking is a secondary issue. The Europeans just started talking. My God, how are you going to follow? That's why it's so difficult when you listen to them talk. You just say, these people talking double talk. I mean, they're not using word trickery or double talk. They just don't know how to talk. These people really just started talking. So they have their superstitions and rituals all embedded in everything, and we call it science, and I try to break half of that down to you about the science and things. This Hippocrates, in the Hippocratic Oath, it says, I will not have sex with my patients, my male patients, female patients. Read the oath. It's right there. If he wasn't gay, why do they have to tell him not to have sex with men? It's right in the oath that the man's gay. But he is worshipped by them, just like they worship that other little Mrs. J. Edgar Hoover. I just put this in here because of the masculinizing of the female, the European female with the high heels. You don't see no pictures of our ancestors, Hatshepsut or Nefertari or Tai with high heels on. Now you know that's not compatible. It throws the spine out of line. You know that. It puts too much pressure on the uterus. It is not sexual. It's handicapping the body. So we look at a handicapped body trying to walk around with these things on, you know, and to us looking handicapped is looking attractive. That is not compatible. Putting a orange red rouge on your face to imitate a B vitamin deficiency is not, I mean, it doesn't go together there. But we've been taught how to look at each other as white people. I look at you as a white man would look at you, and you look at me as a white woman would look at me, and we're not looking at each other through our African eyes. And the only way they can look at you is through their homosexuality, because attached to heterosexuality in European culture is always homosexuality. I try to go over some of it. I know it's a vast subject. I just put this up here because they go in these laboratories with these little rats. You know what I mean? And they run little tests on them, feed them food. Then the other guy goes in there with some marbles. And then they come out with these drugs, and you can see. What do they take Valium for? Anxiety, fatigue, depression, acute agitation, tremors, hallucinations, skeletal muscle spasms. What are the side effects of Valium? It's right in the textbook. Anxiety, fatigue, depression, acute. What do you expect from some guy going in a room with a little rat all day? And why are you going to call him a scientist? If I did that, you called me crazy. Because you talking out of your black mind. You say, this brother's out of his mind. He's going in a room with a rat all day, going to tell me how to eat. No. You walk away from me. Our ancestors used nature, used God to define things. We didn't do that. Oh, boy. I was just showing you some of the disease states when the reproductive system deteriorates from an acidic diet. Rats, cows, pigs, birds do not have venereal diseases. This is something only endemic of someone on chemicals. Chemical addictions cause this. Chemical toxicity. This is deterioration of the uterus. This is what the average Caucasian woman's uterus looked like. And the white boy figured that was an item of sin, you know, so they didn't want to be born through the woman's vaginal canal, because that's an item of sin. As I mentioned before, and this, of course, is warts, a growth on the penis. So, I mean, the white woman didn't trust the white man didn't trust the white woman. I mean, just from, see, you haven't looked at the disease history of their race. So you can see why, you know, they had like, you know, I mean, even you, if somebody pulled that out on you, you back away from them. You know that. You want what? No. You go over there with that sheet like you've been doing. You know, I mean. Deterioration of the reproductive system affects the children directly because of the chemicals that they eat, the kind of thinking, because all these diseases come, remember I said it's spirit, mind, and body. It's not body, mind, and spirit. That's just the European way of looking at it. End result is we destroy our children because then they no longer know how to identify with true sexuality. The end result is destruction of our race because our children become confused. When they're in a homosexual environment, that puts them at risk for becoming homosexual. But when they have homosexuals in their family and their friends are homosexual, that adds a disadvantage to the risk. And the end result is they have sexual confusion. And a confused person is an easy person to control. Someone was telling me next slide, Gregory, you can turn on the lights, please. I had time for some questions?
Yeah, okay. It's okay. Just go forward with it, man.
Okay. Now, we looked at the biochemical makeup of an individual. We understand that once you change the chemistry of a person, you can change the way they think. We know that chemicals influence the mind, mood, and state of consciousness. We know that people have addicted moods. So you can cause a certain amount of mood swings by taxing the heart, making the heart toxic, cause the person to have irregularity in their heart, irregular eating habits, and an irregular lifestyle, just by making the heart toxic. And you can make the heart toxic with xanthine oxidase. That's the enzyme that comes from pasteurized, homogenized milk. It collects in the heart. The countries that have the highest heart attack rate has the highest milk consumption rate, like Sweden. Because once you make the heart toxic or weak, then the person becomes unstable, you see. They become very easy to agitate and irritate because this is the emotional component of chemical toxicity. And we have to keep all of these conditions tracking right along to keep the person vulnerable for homosexuality. You cannot have a healthy person that's homosexual because you have to either disease their spirit, disease their mind, or disease their body. But you have to produce a disease state in one of those areas. Look, how can someone get sexually excited looking at electrical devices? People go to these shops and buy electrical penises and things. You understand? You understand when I was explaining to you how the fragmentation of the Caucasian family produces homosexuality, how they have breeders, which they call wives and husbands, and they have concubines, and they have prostitutes, and they have lovers. Now, they like voyeurism. Voyeurism is watching other people have sex. That is not African, to sit and look at other people having sex. People spend $5, $6 to sit and watch the other people's behinds and stuff. I don't understand these things. Voyeurism is European. Watching people have sex is European. And that's part of the disease condition. It feeds into homosexuality. Remember, I was talking about the gymnasiums. That's when they used to sit in what you call a stadium and watch these guys wrestle naked. And when they won a contest, they pat them on the behind. That's how you selected your homosexual lover. When you were going shopping for the boys, they used to line them up in the gym. And when you go along and pat the one on the behind, that's the one you had. That's where they're getting this pat the behind of in the gymnasium, in football games. I'm telling you where it came from. It didn't fall out of the sky. The shape of the hot dog didn't fall out of the sky. The shape of the ice cream cone didn't fall out of the sky. The shape of the pizza didn't fall out of the sky. Eating a donut didn't fall out of the sky. The shape of these things didn't fall out of the sky. About the only shape of one of their foods that makes any sense is when they put together when the kids were suffocating from eating those raw hard sugar balls they used to make, and the kids would eat them and swallow them and gag to death. And so a guy said, I guess I put a hole in it so when they do swallow they can get air. And the guy said, yeah, that'll be a lifesaver. And that's why they put the hole in the candy. So that's about the only one that makes sense. The rest of them are all sexually shaped. All of them. Everything has to be in, you have to sustain a conflict. You have to keep things together that don't go together to keep homosexuality alive. Your feet are shaped this way. I mean, even when it gets to the shoes, I mean, you got your toes, you know, and then so your shoe has to be shaped that way. What do Europeans do? Point the damn shoe. I don't understand it. Direct opposite of what your shoe foot grows. And black folk be buying these shoes. And it's direct opposite. It's first of all, it's working on the lower sex organs anyway, on that meridian. It's causing that area to be naturally congested. It's just one contradiction supports another, and we just have to get off of the plantation because the master was queer and the mistress was queer, and they still are. So it's no accident why they shape the food the way they shape it and why they organize their clothes the way they organize it. You see, they design their clothes. You know, you have seen who designed their clothes. Come on, don't be looking at me. You know who designed those clothes. That's a hell of a vibration to put on something you wear. Yeah, no. Our ancestors didn't have those people with diseases of homosexuality doing anything until they were cured. And it didn't really show up in our civilization until we came in contact with the Europeans. In the 12th century, and then it started getting a little higher in the 15th century and 16th century, till you find in certain groups of African people on the continent, you will find homosexuals. And they kind of keep them rather isolated. And they won't let them socialize. They'll let them guard a village, but they won't come in the village. They keep them kind of, because they realize they have a disease and it has to be corrected. But we have the intelligence to do this. We have, right here, we have the intelligence to do. We have the ability to neutralize the acidity of the body, which will decrease the craving for sexual appetites. For binge sexing, we can do that with certain alkaline foods, or we can use glutamic acid to neutralize the craving. We have the nutrients to do that, and we have intact the social components with our study groups, our men's group, our women's groups. We have African games. We have to get away from those Caucasian games. All of them involve sex. All of them. You know, Francis, Dr. Wilson does pretty well with that little ball and stick. She can take it and all that pool where they just putting the ball in the pocket and the men just give off these animals' cries when they finally put the ball in the pocket because it's all related, you see. So we have to get away from those sexually orientated games and this voyeurism, sitting around, going to movies, watching people have sex. What in the hell for? I don't understand this. How can you call that entertainment? But people do that. You know, I go to the movies and I just look down when they're doing that. I look down, I close my eyes, and I say, hey, is it over yet? You know, I can't get into all that animal stuff. You know, I don't like to put that vibration in my system, basically. So we have to just kind of get back to from where we came from culturally, so we can get away from these European diseases. The more we eat like them, the more diseases we get like them. The more we get into their culture, the more we get into their homosexuality, because it's not separate. It has never been separate. And the worst thing that's occurring about it is we're losing the children. Hip-hop culture, homosexuality is part of it. You might as well know that. That is part of hip-hop culture, homosexuality. It's in the little textbooks in the elementary school now. I have two daddies, you know. They sleep together. You know, I mean, it's in their little books, and you read this little stuff. You say, boy, this is a heck of a thing to teach a little child. You know, I'm so blessed. I have 2 mommies. They go everywhere together. Yeah, even the bed, you know. You know, it's kind of sick. So we have to kind of either be on guard a lot and understand that the end result of us emulating them is being sick like them. Now, a lot of us like to make us a lot of excuses for our masters and say that they're not sick and they don't do these horrible things. But they are. They are. I want to open up the floor for questions. I understand that some people have some questions. And I know I didn't cover everything, and some people get off the subject totally and ask me something about something totally different, but if that's what you want to ask me, then I'll answer that too. So we are family. If there's something you want to ask, then the floor is open. Just raise your hand and I'll acknowledge you. Yes, sir.
I met a brother about 3 years ago named Ricardo Babbitt.
Yeah.
And he told me that what he said was a fruitarian, and he doesn't drink water at all, and he said don't have sex at all. And so I don't understand with not having sex at all. You explain what he meant by that. And I asked him about church, and he says once every 4 or 5 years, and you into that.
Well, the brother was asking me about a brother that doesn't drink any water and doesn't have any sex. And asked me, was that, I believe the question is that normal? Well, in Africa, with all the fruits that we had, fruit is, what, 80% water. If you're eating a hell of a lot of fruit anyway in Africa, some people wouldn't drink water, but they're eating so much fruit. Then maybe they would drink a little water, but they're eating a heck of a lot of fruit. And that's so far as a non-sexual God. We don't think of God as being sexual, but when you create people, creation is a sexual act. We always thought that God was a woman anyway, because that's the only way we figured anything could have birth is through a woman. So we figured God is a woman. So we always associate it with sex, with being godly in our culture. But there's some people that have their own way of dealing with it. And so I'm just answering your question broadly for everybody. But that's the way he deals with it. But sexual activities is a spiritual, creative activity and a reproductive activity. And it's not ungodly. Maybe the way some people perform it, it is, but it's not ungodly at all. Yes, sir.
I've met some brothers and sisters over the years and I've known that they were homosexual also. Is that a problem because they're spiritually deficient or something? The reason why this confusion going on?
Well, as I mentioned before, it's built into the social system of the Caucasian people anyway. So a lot of people may eliminate part of the disease of being acculturated by being a slave. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm calling it disease in a nice way. So some of us eliminate maybe the name. You know, we got to that part, and some of us eliminate the clothes. We got to that part. But some of us don't get to the diet part. As a lot of our teachers are having problems with their health, with diabetes, glaucoma, having strokes, and all that stuff. They've gotten to the history and the culture, but they didn't get to the diet. And some people don't get to the sexual part because they become addicted to it. It is an addiction. It can be triggered. You can absolutely trigger sexual responses by sounds and colors and by acid conditions. That's why computers are so good for the Europeans, because they're losing their thinking ability. And so they're relying on these machines, and now they're triggering responses with sounds and colors. A young child today can walk down the street, but they get a certain amount of trigger points hit with sounds. By the time they get to the corner, they're going to hurt somebody. And you wonder what happened to them. It's just they're being manipulated by colors and sounds. So I'm trying to say is the person that accomplished that far, but they didn't see any mechanism set to bring them the rest of the way, I suppose, about the homosexual disease and how that's infected in us, projected with the men in the sports and with the women in their sports and the so-called women's liberation movement, the lesbian women's liberation movement that the white women had. that sort of thing. So I think the person still has contracted the disease, nonetheless, but they haven't really gotten to that part of that disease because now they're into a peer influence that supports the disease behavior. They have to get away from that whole behavior altogether. And a lot of people feel fearful in confronting people and saying, yeah, I know you're gay and I know it's a choice, as you say, but I hear the same thing said by heroin addicts. You know, I'm high, see, you're still addicted. And I don't know how to help you, but there's some people that can help you, you know, that kind of thing. We don't really do that with homosexual people. We just kind of like, you know, like some of our Reverend fish fries at these churches. Everybody know they're gay and everything, but we really don't confront them. You know, because a lot of people like that weakness in their minister so they can get away with their weaknesses. You know, that kind of thing.
So is it not correct to say that it's trendy to be gay?
It is trendy to be gay, to be homosexual. Now there are people that are strictly homosexual, then there are people that are what they call bisexual, then there are people that are trisexual, you see. So we have all these categories. Some people have sex with machines, you know that. They buy their little heated up vaginas, and the women buy their little electric dildos and vibrators, and some people still deal with the animals. You put the cat oil on the vagina and then the cat licks the oil off the vagina. Some of the customs of European women, I know black women don't do that, and they still do a lot of things with animals. And some people heat up chicken legs and insert them. And some brothers use certain devices too. I mean, there's a whole trisexual area that you're not even into with food and plants, see, because you're not thinking like they think. So you're not thinking that way. I'm trying to, no, I don't want you to think that way. I'm just trying to say there's a whole area of sexuality that I'm just into this area called homosexuality and heterosexuality, but there's a whole area of trisexuality that deals with animals and things of that sort. And, you know, chains and whips. You heard of that. People put mayonnaise over their body and whip themselves. You know, that area, you know what I'm talking about, the kinky stuff. I call it that, but it's really freaky stuff. Yes, ma'am.
Could you comment on the origin of female circumcision and the political implications?
Okay, female circumcision. The Europeans practiced that because they were afraid of the women that didn't menstruate. And they used to do that for that reason. In fact, they had clitorectomies in Africa even today in many countries where they cut out the clitoris altogether. And they do circumcise the area around the clitoris, and they do cut out the clitoris, and some of them cut out the labia. They have excisms, as they call it, where they cut off part of the female reproductive system. And they cut off part of the male reproductive system, which they call circumcision. And people put spiritual implications around all of these kind of things. But circumcisions are practiced by Christians and I think Muslims and Jews, but there's no physiological reason for men to be circumcised or women to be circumcised. There's no physical reason for it, other than it being a social custom. And I've heard a lot of spiritual things applied to circumcisions and all that sort of thing. And sometimes I just get a hammer and a nail and just go out to a brother's car and they say, to punch a hole in and say, what the hell are you doing there? I said, well, you punch a hole in your ear, think more of your car. And they call me crazy if I did that to their car. Punch a hole in your car, but yet you punch a hole in your ear? I mean, God made a mistake. You should have been born with earrings. I mean, a lot of things that we're doing are just not altogether. There's no physiological reason to do it. But we attach certain spiritual and cultural aspects to these things, but there's no physiological reason to be circumcised, to punch a hole in your ear, or your nose, or your lip, or any of these things. There's no reason for that other than some social custom that most people don't even know where it came from. But they used to do that to demasculinize the woman and to keep her under control. They used to also use what they call a chastisement belt, where they would lock up the woman's vagina when they would leave town, that kind of thing. And the woman used to wear her chastity belt because that's what the Europeans did. So they had those kind of devices, and they also had the chains that they stick these little earrings in the nipples and put chains on them and that sort of thing, and they control women with that. They had chains attached to the woman's nipples too. I mean, I know y'all looking at me like I'm crazy. I know that. But this is part of the whole system Well, people attach a lot of undue value to things that are just totally wrong for the body. And circumcision and clitectomies and excisions are just no physiological reason for them. It's none. But people do these things. The Dark Ages, the European women, they used to, the ones that went on good diets, they didn't menstruate, and they went after them and they called them witch hunts. They used to kill the women that didn't menstruate, and they did the same thing with African women who were spiritual. They went on witch hunts and used to kill them, especially in Massachusetts and certain areas like that, in Boston and Connecticut. Most of the women that were killed on the witch hunts were African women, as you know. And they perfected gynecology and all that stuff on African women, as you know. Dr. Sims, he did that. He used to just practice on all these African women, pulling out their uterus, cut it a little bit, put it back, and that's how he perfected the whole field of gynecology. All that came from African women. And as you know, African women's cancer cells from a uterus is used for the basis of all vaccines. Henrietta Lacks, that's all vaccines all over the world, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Italy. So it's always been exploitation done of the woman. First of all, I want to get that out of the way. That's always been done. And usually if the excision or circumcision was done, it was done in some way to victimize or dehumanize the woman. That's what I'm trying to get to. Although it's no physical reason for it, physiologically, there's a whole lot of just cultural distortions that we need to get rid of. You know.
How
Yes.
do they know the women that didn't menstruate?
Very easily. They were usually breeders, prostitutes, and they were around them. They would travel in packs. The women traveled in packs in back of the militaries. Trying to get to most of the questions. Yes, ma'am.
This is related to your question on the slide, Valium.
Yeah.
And, certain symptoms result in similar side effects. Looking at attention deficit disorder, the Ritalin, Silert, and whatever else they give our children, what is the implication of that, taking the chemicals?
Well, we're looking at a nutrition deficiency being punished. You have certain nutritional deficiencies, like iron deficiency causes boys to not have that left-minded kind of things they need to do on tests. So that's an iron deficiency. A B1 deficiency would cause them to be rather unstable, and each B6 would cause them not to have the kind of concentration they need. Each one of these vitamins are not found in processed food. That's what I'm getting to. And so a child is given, say for instance, a white sugar breakfast, sugary food in the morning. By the time they get to school, they will have a hypoglycemia attack, which means they will be bored and disinterested in the work that they're doing. So when they're having these so-called learning disorders, they're actually being punished for nutrient deficiencies. Just as a woman who's having nutrient deficiency, that will really show up when she has her so-called cycle. PMS is a nutrient-related disease, but women are being punished and exploited by it, and children are being exploited by the diseases they have, which are nutrient deficiencies, undernutrition. And they give them a speed. This speed is called Ritalin. And why it works to calm down the child, as they say, is because when you got like someone that's addicted to alcohol or heroin, they're going to get all kind of bent out and get all crazy when they don't have their drug. But once you give the child their drug, the Ritalin, it calms them out, even though it's a speed. And it causes permanent damage to the nervous system. Most people that were given Ritalin end up committing suicide. At least 7 out of 10, I believe, like Jimi Hendrix and this other guy that just died, Janis Joplin, all of them were on Ritalin. And it just is a whole string of people you see, entertainers that killed themselves recently, they usually have been on Ritalin. And this goes along with the Ritalin. So what happens is it burns like little holes in the nervous system. And it is a class 2 narcotic. And most of the time the child is basically having a nutrient deficiency. And of course they are not raised according to the proper growth and development of an African child anyway. Because the melanin causes the nerve to reach the sphincter muscle by the time they're 6 months. So African child can be toilet trained at 6 months. But we raise our children according to the growth and development of white children. And the white child's sphincter muscle, the nerve doesn't reach it until they're 2 years old. So here we go raise them as retards. And then their neurohormone development is complete when they're 12. and that means they're adult when they're 12. So we wait till they're 18 or 19 or 20, and then we call them adult, because that's the growth and development of a European child. So we retard them from the beginning, and then if an African child is born to a mother who was breastfed and a father who was breastfed, when that child is born, they can sit up, know their name, know their mother's and father's name at birth, and look you in the eye. If they have been raised by their mother and father were breastfed and they were on natural diets, that's what happens. So a lot of things are just the child being punished for crimes of their mothers and fathers, you see. And so we don't really know how to even deal with our children. We don't know how the proper language to use to an African child. When a child sees energy, our children see energy and feel energy, spiritual energy. They will see energy walking through the room. It may just be blue. And then they get scared to talk about all the things they see and hear, because their melanin, they're just wide open. So they're getting energy from all over the place. They may even talk to your dead grandmother or something. They'll tell you, you have to teach them how to go into trances at night. You have to prepare them for their trances. Instead, when they go into their trances, somebody smack them up the side of the head and say, why are you daydreaming? So we're not utilizing with the spiritualness of our children. So they're being punished on too many scores already. And we don't know how to talk to them when they see this energy. Like if they feel a certain spirit in a room, they say, there's a lion in the room. And we say, there's no lion in the room. Boy, stop lying. But the child is talking in a child's language about some energy. And we have to say, yes, there's a lion in the room. Let's go talk to it and ask the lion to protect the house. Or let's be friends with the lion and deal with the energy that they're experiencing. But we just kind of do a lot of things to our children, and then we punish them by raising them as a white child. And then they have responses because they're suppressing this education they're getting, which is not education. And they're being put in these special education classes, and for each 10 children put in there, only 2 graduate. The other either drop out, age out, you follow me? But they never graduate. Only 2 out of 10 graduate from special education. The rest of them are just in holding pens for prison. And so all this is being done to them because they're rejecting this pollution taught to them from these sex-orientated books and stories about some little child. A black boy would never jump over some counter and almost drop a Q in his testicles. Whatever. Hell, I'd be doing jumping over a candle. Please. A white dude would do that. That's sexually exciting to some white dude, to put some fire on his testicles and jump over it back and forth. A lot of this stuff is really sick when you listen to it. A baby in a cradle rocking and falling down. Rockabye baby on a treetop. That's violent stuff. Some kid going up a hill, falling down and cracking his head. My God. Couldn't even get some water out of a well. What's his name? Jack and that little white girl, Jill. Oh, them two get on my nerves. There's some sick children there. Anyway, I'm just saying it's just a whole lot going on, but mostly it's a nutritional kind of thing. Sometimes we use paradoxin, vitamin B6. Sometimes you use dopa as supplements, and sometimes you use melatonin where you give that at night, and so the child can get rest to deal with this so-called hyperactive behavior. There's supplements that can be used for it. That's why I want you to know that, is to deal with that condition. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, a woman menstruating, that's from a diet, and what she's been formed to eat now. What they're taking in now, it's something that's only normal because they're taking something in that's abnormal. Am I correct?
You're correct. You're correct. And that same thing happens, it shows up in the men's body, which we call prostatitis. You see, and we call that prostate problems and prostate cancer. Those are diseases, those fibroid kind of conditions that show up in the man, but it's usually centered around the prostate, which I mentioned before. That's on a solar cycle, and the testicles are on a lunar cycle. We have 2 different cycles, and they meet a compatible center, which we call the raw factor, balances those 2 cycles. But in the male system, all of these things are even worse. Because without that system, since the man only has 1 sex center and the female has 2 sex centers, when that center is shut down, it doesn't help the utilization of the 12 melanin centers in the brain that African people have, where Europeans have 2 melanin centers, or what the Indian people call chakras. The white people have 2 melanin centers, 2 chakras, and African people have 12 chakras in the brain. And so we treat each other and raise each other as if we have white brains, and that's way off. But the utilization of those chakras only occurs when you stimulate the prostate correctly. You follow me? But all that stops when you take in salt. When a black man takes in salt, which dehydrates the prostate, vinegar, which crenates the prostate, all this is acting to directly on the prostrate. So usually the whole system starts, the penis, as I mentioned before, starts pointing gradually down to the ground, and the ding-dong dies eventually. You see. Another question here. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you just said that 12 chakras are in the brain.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I've just been reading that they're, in various parts of the body. I'm starting to make the crown chakra. So
Yes.
that's incorrect, or?
Well, you have 12 in your brain, and you have 12 in a place around your body, as in heaven is on earth. Yeah. And then you have your flat brain, which you call your sacred bone, which they call the sacral, and you have your round brain. So these are complementary centers of energy that are vibrated. And that's where you get the 12 steps of Jacob's ladder, the 12 halls of Osiris, the 12 cranial nerves. All that comes out of that Egyptian mythology story. It explains the working of these chakras. Some people relate them to the zodiac, and they have those kind of responses. Where I use basically tuning forks to stimulate those centers, what they call tuning forks, and you put those on those centers to vibrate them. That sort of thing.
Thank you. I just have one more question.
Well, certainly.
Now, you gave the indication of a man who loses her fragility, his member pointing downward. What is it for a woman when she loses her, fertility or
Vitality of the system, yes. So we have compatible emotions here. Usually we don't get that motion response. See, when the breasts move up the uterus, we call them appendages. You have the fallopian tubes, which are called the two arms. And you have the ovaries, which are called the two legs. Those are appendages of the uterus, which is an upside-down pyramid. It looks like a pyramid upside down. And that's birth comes out of that upside-down pyramid. And when you turn it upside the other way, it's male. And when you put them together, they call it the Star of David. You follow me? Now, so as I'm going back to as above is below. The breasts go up, then the appendages of the uterus should go up too. And when they don't respond, then you can measure the system that way. You follow me? That's just one way of measuring the vitality of the reproductive system. You see? But we have to stabilize the hormone level, because the diet that we eat in this country is a male-orientated diet. So it drains the estrogen level of the lady, because it's a male diet in the first place, you see. So a lot of times ladies will get into a hormone conflict and get some mood swings and hot and cold flashes, and when the supply to the brain is altered, then you don't have enough food for your brain, and you have memory lapses and forget things. All this is part of that hormone change that occurs, which people call PMS or menopause and all that sort of thing. So the main thing is to stabilize the hormone level with any of those herbs, blessed thistle, black cohosh, damiana. You probably know more of them than I do. Dunquois. You probably know more of them than I do, actually. So you have to stabilize that area first of all. And you have to do more things from a spiritual side, because of the way the system is structured. Remember, I told you it's structured different when I did the systems. I was talking about when you use the four divinities. And what's this foot doing over here? Man, you can't have a foot everywhere. Okay. I was doing the four divinities, and I did the female, and I said it goes from earth, water, yes, air, and fire, or sun. You're right. That's the way the female. The male system doesn't go that way. The male system goes to earth, then air, then water, then fire. Even the taste buds are orientated on the same plane. Because you have these major taste buds, which when you're into a junk food diet, it causes you to only stimulate the taste buds on your tongue, but you have the parotid taste buds of the salivary gland area, and then you have the taste buds on the floor of your mouth. And when you chew your food fully, you should stimulate each one of those taste centers. You follow me? Yes. So if you stimulate those three centers, then you're stimulating up in here. And the fire is only stimulated when you spiritualize the food. That's the only way you can stimulate the fire is by spiritualizing the food. So this food is spiritual, and this food passes through your body as a spirit, and you're a spirit, and the food is trying to go to its other higher development through your spirit, and it uses your spirit for that. So that's why you treat food spiritually first, and then as a nutrient second, like that, because the end result of the food is to go back to earth, which I have right here. You're starting off with earth, which is what we call the food. And the only thing that connects you to the earth is the vegetation, so you have to have a spiritual connection to the vegetation. So we saw the food as spiritual, African people. When the Europeans go body, mind, and spirit, we go spirit, mind, and body, like that. So we do that kind of orientation where the man's taste bud is orientated this way. That's why if a man seasons some food, it's going to taste different from the way a woman seasons the food, because he's seasoning the food based on this principle here of energy exchange. A woman goes from like being a child to womanhood, then youth, then adulthood, where a man goes from childhood to youth, then manhood, then to old age, as we call it, like that. But a woman goes to womanhood first before she becomes youth. But a man goes to youth and then manhood. It's a different sequence of growth response based on the hormone levels of stimulation and based on the need that has to be done here. You see, we always stabilize the ground and we're always in harmony with the earth here, but then we get this mixture here of water and air. This is where you get a crossing of the systems. And that's the same major crossings that occurs in the nervous system. It occurs this way too. That's why when our ancestors did the caduceus, as you call it, that indicates those crossings here. And this is part of a game they call the pit and pebble game, which people call hopscotch, where you start off with the. This is all accidental conversation. Well, I can answer questions. This is very accidental. So you start off with this pit and pebble game. And you're going to go up, eventually you're going to go up to the fire, which is up here, right? And that's why that's up at the top. But you're going to start down here with the Chinese call the yin and yang principle, of male and female. You see, then you're going to have to, some kind of way, get to these points here, these 5 points, which is what the pyramid looks like when you up in the sky and you look down on it. You're going to see this point here, which is the 4 major divinities. Earth, air, water, and fire, which is only balanced by Ra in the center, you see. And then you start off with the male and female, and you have to go through these steps here, which some people call Jacob's ladder, which some people call the zodiac, in order to reach your fire, which you call Ra. See, you start off from what is hidden, then what is revealed, and what is expressed, which some people call Amun, Ra, and Ptah. What is hidden, what is revealed, and what is expressed. We come from blackness, which is melanin. This whole planet sits in blackness. You've seen pictures of outer space and you see the sun out there and you say, what's all that black from? If the sun's out there, everything should be lit up. But the sun is sitting in this melanin gas. Because you have melanin gas, melanin liquid, melanin crystals. But the Europeans only measure melanin crystals because they can only deal with something they can weigh and touch and see, that sort of thing. But melanin comes in all these different forms. And we are able to duplicate all those different forms. Because melanin can change form without changing structure. I don't want to get too technical. It's like if you burn a tree and it turns to ashes. The tree has changed form, but it had to change structure to become ashes. So the ashes cannot become a tree again because the tree has changed structure in order to change form. But melanin can go from tree to ashes and ashes back to tree. That's what makes this melanin thing so great in your body. It does all of these things. And that's why we're connected to the fire, because the fire comes out of darkness. Everything comes out of darkness, out of this melanin cloud. And they call that the ethereal spirit. Everything is born out of the ethereal, or the liquid, or the amniotic fluid. See, in order to come to rebirth, you have to come through the amniotic fluid. That's why they put the child in the basket and let it float down the river. Moses is a word that means child. It's not a person's name. In order for the child to be born in the amniotic fluid, it is put in the river, and that's why they have all the symbolism in that story I was telling you about with Osiris and Isis. That story explains everything. And I don't have to go through this pit and pebble game here explaining the yin and yang, as the Chinese like to say, of the four divinities, earth, air, fire, and water. Teaches you that. Just like the game of cards teaches you the sun and the moon, 52 cards, 52 weeks in the year. Is that how it goes? 365 points in the deck, 365 days in the year. The four divinities, earth, air, and fire, the four major suits. That was a game teaching someone the relationship between the sun and the moon and the stars. But if you don't know that, it's a game. You see. And if you don't know that, then this is a game. But this is teaching the person how to balance their system and to ignite the fire. And the spirit of the plant respects you when you do this, because you're allowing the plant as a spirit to go through its high development. Because spirit is everything is spirit to us African people. A talent is a spirit. You say it's a gift, but that's a spirit that's in you. And you got to honor that spirit, because if you don't, that's like spitting in God's face. You can't throw away a talent that God gave you. He gave it to you. You don't throw it away. You got to use it. You have to honor that spirit. That's the spirit of God, what you call a talent. The Europeans don't want you to use the word spirit. That's why they say theory. That's why they do it, because they don't want you to use the word spirit. They don't want you to say spirit. They want you to say talent. They don't want you to say the music doesn't have any. The music has soul in it. That's what they don't want you to say. The word music has spirit in it. They want you to say soul. They want you to say something. Then people start looking at the shoes soul. You know, don't get it. But in case it's that kind of development there. I kind of went off the point there, but.
I have your book, and I was just, it's truly revealing. I didn't know that the game of bowling, they call it a game.
Yeah.
For us, it was what, healing?
Yeah, that's how you did readings. It's a divining instrument, yeah.
There's a sound.
Yeah, it's a divining instrument. It's hello there. They just took a lot of things from us. That's all there is to the question. Oh, one more. All right, yes, sir.
In your book, you talk about the mystery system. I would like you to explain to the group about the mystery system and the difference between esoteric and esoteric.
Yeah, okay. The mystery.
I read that. I found that incredibly fascinating.
The mystery system is the academic course of studies that our ancestors taught the children and all. And they don't want us to say it was an education. They want us to say it's a rites of passage. They don't want us to say we have ancient textbooks. They want us to say we have papyrus. But I figure if they're going to call our books papyrus, then I'm going to call their books trees. I mean, you know, they make their books out of trees, so I'm going to call their books trees. They're going to call our books papyrus. No, they're textbooks that our ancestors wrote. And that's what they were. And we don't have rites of passage. That's a German term anyway. You know, that's just an academic course of study. And a lot of things that our ancestors were, like using the math, it's a language to explain something. The Europeans call it a science because they were not evolved as we were. Remember, the average African child was speaking about 12 languages. By the time you were 12 years old, you had the equivalent of what the Europeans call a PhD. So you have a 12-year-old child trying to talk to a European who has like a third grade education. I mean, that's what the average white person had that came to Africa. They thought that the earth was flat, remember, that they were going to fall the hell off. You know that? I mean, they came with this primitive understanding, and they came to a hot climate, and there was a lot of conflict even with the climate. Now, you realize, of course, that when you're talking to a 2-year-old child and you got this vast vocabulary, you got to start limiting your words, or the child will not understand what you're saying. And the same thing occurred to the Europeans. So they come with this limited understanding, limited knowledge, and then you got this vast education, and you start explaining the stars, and they said, this is a mystery to me. This whole thing is a mystery system, because it is a mystery to them. It is a mystery system to them, but it's not a mystery system to us at all. You have to understand how sick your slave master is and was. I mean, these folks are still very sick. You look at them as normal, but when you go into their stores, this is really sick. To have a woman's breast cut off and laying on a counter, a mannequin, is really sick. But we're conditioned to look at all these amputations, a person's arm laying on a counter, a head cut off and laying on a counter. That is sick. I mean, really. But we in this civilization, and we used to look into I mean, I go into their stores and I go out, you know, horrified at all these amputated body parts laying around, just a woman's hips with some pantyhose. They didn't cut off the whole top of the woman's body. You know, just got her hips laying there with some pantyhose on, you know. I said, Jesus, these people are sick. You know, and then they walk up to you with ice cream and the ice cubes in their glass and say they're not attached to the ice age. I mean, you know, it's so obvious after a while that these people are really where they are. So they came to our country, and everything seemed to be a mystery system to them. So we have an introduction mystery system for those people that are outside of it, exiting it, and that's exoteric. They're outside of it. So you give, it's like what you would call a grammar school education that prepares you for your education, because you don't get into school till you get into the 10th grade. Everything else is just training you for your education, which starts at the 10th grade. I think it's the 10th grade. That's when high school starts, 9th grade, 9, 10, 11, yeah. So everything is supposed to be training you for your education, which is called a high school education. That was their high education. And grammar school prepares you for that. And that's why they call those grades from the kindergarten on up grammar school, because it gives you the basic ground foundation for your schooling. And so they called everything a mystery, because there wasn't that many of them that read and write during that particular period of time. Only a few of them could read and write. Most of the kings and queens, Henry VII, Queen Mary of Scots, none of them could read and write. They had certain people that were trained that could read and write, but they could not read and write. So a lot of things were just totally a mystery to them. So we have what they call a certain amount of learning, like we gave Pythagoras. He was educated in Africa for about 22 years, and he was forced to become a vegetarian, he said. I am forced to become a vegetarian because of the education required that kind of vibration. So he had to get rid of eating these pigs and things that they eat, like the little rats. They used to eat rats and pigs, and they dress up in rat fur, which they call mink. A mink's in the rat family. You know, and they eat little rats, which they call rabbits. A rabbit is in the rat family. They eat little hopping rats, and they wear little rat furs and things like that. They're rat people, so I just, you know, go along with it. Anyway, so that they come to our country, and so Pythagoras received what we call an exoteric education. He didn't get into the higher level, but because he was just there 22 years. So nonetheless, we have this whole system of education, which today I guess you would call it a master's or some kind of degree, which you receive. And everyone was educated according to their talent and according to their field of expertise. If your expertise was in chemistry, then you were educated in that. And usually you were picked. Your ancestors could tell what you had a talent for when you were young. Your elders did that. You would have to fumble around, changing majors and going this career and just saying, I don't know where I really belong in, you know. I'm just doing this till, till the spirit moves me to do something else. I mean, all that was eliminated. Your ancestors just read you points and said, no, this child belongs here. You know, and then so you didn't have these people fumbling all over each other with these marriages and stuff. They said, no, I know you like the lady, but in 5 years, when she makes this change, you will not no, that's not your marriage. So they eliminated all these hassles. We for about the first time in about 100 years, 1,000 years, of picking each other. We never picked. The only thing we used to pick is cotton any damn way, tell you the truth. And that's why we're having so many problems. But nonetheless, we're getting over these things with God's help now. You know, no problem. So the educational system involves your diet, it involves spirituality, and it involves action. Because with children, action is synonymous with thought. When a child is just moving around a lot, they're thinking a lot. And you say, why are they moving so much? Oh, they're busy. And you visualize them as being very physical, and I visualize them as thinking. You say, they're young. You know how young people have all the energy? No, they ain't got all the energy. That's how they think. If they don't move, they ain't thinking. And you try to sit them down and just, that ain't going to work. They got to move. Action is synonymous with thought. So the education was synonymous with action. And that's why we always had a drum in the classroom, in the college classroom, in all classrooms, there was always a drum. And that may have been the worst thing that happened to us when they took the drum out of school. I'm beginning to think it is, because we lost the whole rhythmicity of ourselves. So we had this massive educational system that wasn't confined to just royalty. They went to these pyramids and these educational centers. The family itself was an educational institution. Your grandmother, your grandfather, they ran a school. That's where you get this term family medicine from. The family was medicine. You got sick, you go to the family. You want to save money, you go to the family. You want to learn something, you go to your family. That was your institution, a political institution in itself. A dangerous person is a person with a family, you know, to a European. So that what they want to do, bust up the family, automatically. So in any case, we have this educational system that was intact, all across the continent. It was holistic in its approach. We dress to express something, to express where we are, to show the spiritual ramifications, to show where we come from, the birth, the wound here, coming out of the wound. All of this is a language, but to a person who doesn't know a language, it's a design. Because everything is a language. But if you don't know the language, it's a design or it's a fashion, that sort of thing. So the education was all around you, was put in your food, on how you balance your food, how you combine your food, and for each level you attain, your diet would change, and the dance form you could do would change. There's certain dances a person 13 could not do that a person 30 could do, because you hadn't attained that level to handle that energy. Like the so-called belly dancing. It was done at the Chicago World Fair in 1922. Some African ladies came over here trying to show the system of fanning the flame and accepting Ra and the moon into their solar plex. And the Europeans look at it and call it belly dancing and associate it with sex. Because that's what they do. But that's fanning the flame. And when you take the muscles clockwise, that's taken in Ra. And when you take it counterclockwise, that's taken in the moon, which is a reflection of Ra. And all that's explaining birth. It explains the whole ritual and ceremony of birth, because the dance was holistic. Our dancing was never sex-centered. Never sex-centered. It was always spiritual-centered. And so the dancing explained lessons, the drum explained the same lesson. Everything was an education. Everything. Our people wrote on everything. Coffins, floors, walls, everything. The ceiling, everything was just education. Being in Africa, in a city of African, was very entertaining, very exciting. It's very exciting to be an African. Just a great feeling. But when you come into a European kind of system, it's really boring to African people. It's really boring. The white people are boring. You know, they absolutely are. You know, so it's rather boring being in that social environment, where our environment, the plays were not at a theater. The theater company came to your village and put on the play in your village and came in your house and performed, and you performed with them. You were part of the acting company when it came to your village. So when it was just exciting to be African in an African town, but this European thing is just really boring, as the kids say. It is. So I went around and I was trying to give a broad thing about the mystery system for everyone involved here. Yes?
I've read several books on nutrition, including yours. And yours was the second one I read. The first one I read was called Fit for Life. I want to know if you're familiar with that, and if you are, what do you think about what they talk about in that book?
Fit for Life. I think I looked at that one. I think I looked at it 10 years ago. I don't really recall a lot of it.
It talks a lot about eating fruit in the morning.
Oh yeah, the rhythm of the body.
It talks about your body rhythm, the cycles that your body goes through.
Yeah. Yeah, it talks about it's addressing the rhythmicity of the body, where your body can take in food between basically 12 and 7 p.m. We call it alimentation. When you take in food, and from 7 p.m. to 4 in the morning, your body is going through something that you call metabolizing. And from 4 in the morning till 12 noon, your body is cleansing. So from 4 a.m. to 12 noon, you should be taking in cleansing things like fruits and drinking water. And then from 12 to 7, you can take in your meal, which around 12 to 2 should be your heaviest meal. Your lunch meal should be your heaviest meal, because that gives you the whole day to process it through your system. And then you should have what people call a lunch at dinner. That should be kind of your light meal, basically. And so that system is conforming to the rhythm of the body. But African rhythm is different from Caucasian rhythm. And it's different from Chinese rhythm based on the neurohormone development that you have. So we're at number 6, and the Europeans at number 1. And then the Chinese and Japanese at number 5. And then you get into the Mexican, that load of stuff there, that's number 4, the Indian people. And you get to number 3, where you're getting into those mixed breed kind of things that people call it, which is no such thing technically. And then you get to number 1, which is the European. So we're at number 6. And so our rhythm is basically more superior than the rest of the cultures. And we have more chakras than Indian people. And we have more bodily responses than other races because of that melanin that we have. So what we're talking about is that kind of cycle in your body where you can, you have the ability to adjust. That's what I'm trying to get to. You can adjust and change. That's why every change on this planet was always introduced by an African person, calculus, astronomy, architecture, because we are the change agents. If it's any race that can save planet Earth, it's African people. No, Japanese can't do it, Chinese, African people can do it. We're the ones that introduce all the change on this planet. We're the change agents. And this melanin allows us to convert energy. That deals with the metabolism, because melanin metabolizes carbohydrates. So that allows us to metabolize food at a higher level, because we can use our skin in the metabolic process where the Europeans and the Chinese and Orientals cannot use their skin to help metabolize food. So we're a little more superior when it comes to that, and that causes the sequence of the reproductive system to be a little different. Usually when you get into the Oriental race and white race, if you want to figure out the span of time that, for the ejaculation of the sperm, you multiply the man's age times 2. So a fellow that's 20 years old, you multiply times 2, you get 4. So you know he can ejaculate every 4 days. You see? That tells you the sperm cycle, the maturity of sperm. But that's based on Caucasian and Oriental. Basically, you have to do maybe 1.5 times 2 with an African man. But I always use 2 because I just want to be stricter on the brothers. But you know, but that's the way I put it. You know, I don't want to tell them that part. I'm just trying to get them to the, you know, that sort of thing. So, but that's how you find the ejaculatory schedule, and that way you won't be harming your prostrate and you know, just blowing a flat in your testicles. If you follow that kind of ritual, just multiply your age times 2, and that gives you the span it takes the sperm to mature, that sort of thing. But that's rhythm, and that's the cycle, and it's different and high evolved with African people. But I'm familiar with the book. I usually read through them in about 15 minutes or something like that. I thank you very much. I hope I didn't offend anyone, but I know that all of us have homosexuals in our family somewhere. You know, my uncle, God rest his soul, was a homosexual, and he was a homosexual in the Marines. And he would lock men up for various reasons. He used to laugh about him stopping some black soldier and said, "Honey, you under arrest." And the guy said, "What for?" He said, "Because I'm arresting you." And he'd take him somewhere and do something and arrest him. He used to tell me about the things he used to do during a war, you know. Jesus. So we can help someone with some information and share some things, because all of us got someone with crack in our family. I do. I got people with AIDS in my family. You know, I got people with heart attacks, strokes, diabetes. You know, they don't even listen to you. First they think you're weird anyway. You change your diet, change your name. You know, they think they're weird. You know, they respect you, but they think you're weird. You know, my mother knows better. She was a nurse. She knows about sugar and all these things and all that. But she will say, you know, she's gonna eat a little quart of ice cream, and she knows what's wrong. You know, she knows it's wrong to, you know, mess with the little chitlins and stuff, you know. You know, Brother Oink catch hell in my family, you know. He does, you know. People eat his ear, tail, anything, you know, guts, you know. They give Oink trouble there. But anyway, a lot of the people in your family having these problems with it. They have eating disorders where they're compulsively eating, hiding food and snacks all over the place, always got something to eat in the glove compartment, in the desk at work, you know, always got some food because they could have eating disorders, you know. So we can help them out to a degree, if not just show the kids the right way. So we can help the homosexuals to have that epidemic and disease in our race, and the people with eating disorders, and the people on crack and cocaine, because we're using the spirit power. And the spirit power is going to win this one. This is the spiritual warfare that we're in. And we can do it. And we should just rest assured that our ancestors let us come this far, and they died in them cotton fields for us to be here. And we have a hell of a responsibility to them. You know, and a lot of people victimize and say, if I was a slave, I would have ran away. Oh, I would have did in the white people. And here we don't even stop our kids from being ambushed with guns and crack in the street. And we talking about what we did if we was a slave, victimizing our ancestors. That really gets me, you know, when people start putting down our ancestors. And they're not stopping this stuff happening right now with all that technology and stuff. But anyway, I'm just saying that we do have epidemic with this homosexuality. I know a lot of us don't like to look at it, and we don't like to feel this happening, and you know, we ignore the ones in our race that are really way out there, you know, but it's happening and it's escalating. If we just be more conscious about it and say, even if you're walking along the street and you're walking with your son or your daughter or a young child and you see a homosexual, you can just say, well, that's the way I don't want you to be. I mean, that can be a lesson. Sort of like a drunk man that's supposed to taught school and he didn't teach. He just stand on the corner drinking. And so he's still teaching because God meant for him to teach. So the people walk by and say, son, I don't want you to be that way. So he's teaching by example. But he's going to teach because that's what he was supposed to do. So we can just point, say that's not the way. I mean, Whoopi Goldberg is not the way. Diana Ross is not the way. Sidney Poitier, white girl, not the way. That's not the way. We cannot marry those people. Michael Jackson, we can't marry those people. That's spiritual suicide. I mean, you know, you can't, that's just like, you're killing your spirit by marrying a white person. I'm just telling you, because I know how I am. I would just wake up in the middle of the night with one of my little slave dreams next to, you know, and some white girl was laying there, and I said, kill the white people, kill the white people. I know how I would do it. You know, I know I would do that, you know, because I get into my little cold sweats, you know, you know, especially on them planes with that fur all around with them white people, because they don't have hair, they have fur, and they, you know, sure. Anyway, I'm just saying that we can spiritually, you know, do something to help our people, and it's up to us. We're the vanguard, and we can point the way. Even with our actions, we're pointing the way. So let's just keep pointing the way, brothers and sisters. One race, one purpose, one God.